I don't know if y'all can hear us now. We're going to officially call the Strategic Planning Committee meeting to order, and I know that we have two members who are here, Ms. Mendoza and Brenda are here, and so hopefully they'll be joining us in just a minute. But we have a lot to cover, and I'd like to ask the indulgence of our audience that we are going to try to move a few things around on the agenda today because a couple of our members have to catch planes between 3 and 3:30, and we're going to do the capital projects at the front end, but then we'll probably move formula funding up next for discussion, and then a few other items before some of these members have to leave. So would appreciate your understanding in that. The first item on our agenda is the committee chair's report, and I really don't have anything new to report other than to say that there's been a lot of work done on incentive funding. You there? Excuse me. That we'll report on later on. There was an incentive funding task force yesterday that met for the first time, and as opposed to reporting on that, the first of this meeting, I'd like to give a summary of that at a latter part of the meeting. So to start off, we're going to move on into our capital projects. Say one other thing I forgot. We do need to approve the minutes from the December 13th meeting. Each of y'all should have received that in your packets. And if so, could I have a motion to approve those as written? So movement by Mr. Heldenfeld, second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Mendoza. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by the same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. The first item on the agenda for consideration is two recommendations to the board, and the first of these is for approval of the construction and the rehabilitation and property purchase projects. And the first project is a request from Texas A&M University System Health Science Center to construct the Nursing and Health Professions Education Center, and Virgil Gates here to make the presentation.
This is a supplemental agenda item. We received some information last night.
Okay.
So it's been changed a little bit.
This one right here.
Right.
Okay. Welcome.
All right. Good afternoon. I was waiting for... Okay, there it is. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. We're going to talk about the Nursing and Health Professions Education Center. The nursing...
I think anybody can hear you. If you'll pull your mic a
Get a little closer.
Closer.
Is that better? The Nursing and Health Profession Education Center is one of the first two teaching facilities to be built on the new campus for the Texas A&M University System Health Science Center. The new campus consists of about 200 acres of land gifted to the Texas A&M University system, and it's located on the north side of State Highway 47, just to the west of Raymond Stalter Parkway, which is FM 60 in Bryan, Texas, as you can see there. Master plan for the new campus has been completed, which established the location of the Nursing and Health Professionals Education Center, along with other initial phase and future facilities. You can see here, this is the site plan that shows the relationship of the Nursing and Health Professionals Education Center to the Medical Education and Research Building, which is the other teaching facility to be considered in the first phase development. Now, the Medical Education and Research Building was previously approved by the Coordinating Board in July of 2007. The initial phase of the campus development will also include a central utility plant that will serve an initial construction and be expandable to serve much of the completed campus. A portion of the space and the cost of the central plant has been prorated into the corresponding data reporting in this application for the Nursing and Health Professional Education Center. This is the first floor that you see here, and it's hard to read it. I'll just tell you what's on the first floor. Actually, the ground level, as we call it. It will contain 4 occupied levels. The ground level will serve as an education conference lecture center for the Health Science Center during initial phases of the campus development. This level contain lecture rooms, seminar rooms, and small group classrooms. This first level slide shows to contain staff offices, information technology hub, There'll be a learning resource center, a dining and kitchen area to serve both the first phase buildings and the student support services area for the main entry lobby. On the second level, we'll have a computerized state-of-the-art nursing simulation labs, which will have automated mannequins to provide real-time training to students and healthcare professionals. And the third level will contain a dean's suite, faculty offices, along with conference and other support areas. The estimated total building area is 122,209 gross square feet. What you see here is an elevation of the Nursing and Health Professional Education Center looking from the plaza area. The exterior of the building will be brick and cast stone masonry units combined with curtain wall and window wall systems. Next one, please. And this last slide shows an elevation again from the plaza area, but it also shows the Nursing and Health Professional Education Center together with the Medical Education and Research Building. The Nursing and Health Professions Education Center will be completed for the summer of 2010, and the Medical Ed and Research areas will be completed for spring 2011. Now, the total budget for the project is $68 million. When I say project, I'm talking about the Nursing and Health Professionals Building portion of it, which we have here for your approval. And the breakdown of the total budget is shown in the construction application. Funding for the project is Permanent University Fund debt proceeds, and we'll entertain any questions.
Questions for Virgil? What was the change in the two, what we originally read? Was the parking lot additional? Is that what it was?
Right, the parking lot had not been separated out, and so we didn't have data on how much of the building cost. It had the building going over the
So that's what
cost
caused us to
rate.
exceed the cost standard?
Yeah.
Right.
I got my eyes going.
That's good.
And so that was what the change was.
Okay.
Virgil, the contingency on this project is at $7.4 million, which is about 17.5% of the construction cost, or about 11% of the total cost. Just general terms, how did that contingency number, how was that arrived at?
Usually, the contingency is arrived at roughly a 10% number that we go forward with. In the construction manager at risk format that we're building these projects in, the contractor's price that we are given usually has embedded anywhere from a 5 to, say, 7% contingency in it, and we like to hold about a 5% contingency outside of that for not only construction but the project as a whole. So sometimes when we're putting in the data, we will combine those numbers and make them seem unusually large. But a portion of that is the construction. When we get a guaranteed maximum for the project, some of those, that will be in a guaranteed maximum price, excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, could I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Thank you, Elaine. Second? Second. Fred, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Virgil. Appreciate it. The second project is a request from the University of Texas at Austin to construct experimental science building in Bavarian at Welch Hall. I guess this is phase one that we're talking about. And Dave's here, and who's your associate with you?
Thank you. Yes, I'm Dave Dixon, Executive Director for Program Management at UT OIPC System.
And I'm David Ray, Director of Campus Planning for University of Texas at Austin.
Thank you, David. Good to have you here.
We also have in the audience the Associate Dean for the College of Natural Sciences and the Dean of Pharmacy, I believe, for any programmatic questions that the committee may have. Starting off with our first slide here, UT Austin is seeking board approval to construct the experimental science building, vivarium, and as you say, the phase one of Welch Hall renovation. Location for this project, 24th and Speedway, just a few other buildings that you would recognize, the main building and, of course, DKR, Texas Memorial Stadium. The next agenda item we'll be talking about, I'm sorry, back up half a tick here, yeah. The next agenda item we'll be talking about this building right here. That's the Biomedical Engineering Building. I'm sorry, next slide, please. This $175 million project includes the replacement of the 1949 Experimental Science Building. Also include, and we replaced that building, which is, as you can imagine, pretty antiquated in terms of modern research and teaching. That's the current building is a 211 gross square foot building. We're replacing that with a 287,000 gross square foot state-of-the-art science facility. Additionally, a 20,000 square foot vivarium, and the Welch Hall renovation, which is right across the street, is in the northeast corner, 4 floors of mechanical, electrical, and general lab renovation of that space. This particular project, the new ESB, Experimental Sciences Building, will incorporate several sustainable elements to it. Of interest may be a solar heating system for the building, a green roof, the first at UT Austin that will serve not only as a roof for the facility, obviously a sustainable roof, but as a gathering area for groups within the building and campus itself. Also have a rainwater collection distribution center, high efficiency mechanical and electrical systems, windows, and the rest. The facility will include modern technology-enabled classrooms and undergraduate teaching labs, space for the faculty and staff for chemistry, neuroscience, biology, and the environmental sciences. Next slide, please. This rendering shows the 6-level facility, and as you can see, it complements the campus's standard master plan approved limestone base, campus blend brick, and then a terracotta attic penthouse section that's not readily apparent on the rendering that we have here. This project is $175 million, as I say, funded by a combination of tuition revenue bonds, PUF funds, and interest on local funds. The project meets all the guidelines and standards of the board, and UT Austin seeks approval to proceed with construction. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
Curiosity, the green roof, did y'all analyze the relative costs of that versus standard roof in terms of both initial construction and life cycle costs?
We did. The initial construction, of course, is a bit higher than you would see in a typical roof, but we believe the durability of the sealant system that we get with this type of roof, you're going to see a longer lifespan for the roof itself. The economics, I believe were run. I do not recall what they are at this point, but it is one of the elements that will lead us to what we hope is a LEED Silver certification for this building.
Can you comment also on and this is something we've talked about each of our meetings, but there's the other cost category and what's included in there, that's $6.5 million.
I cannot, but we do have somebody that may be able to. Jim Shackelford is my senior project manager on the project. Jim, do you have any thoughts on that?
Your question was regarding the other costs. That's going to include some of our costs other than the administrative costs, such as construction materials testing, some of our test and balance, as well as some of the campus managed.
Institution managed.
Well, it's not institution managed now, but the cost of the institution will occur to activate the building, such as relocation costs for researchers and faculty members and so on.
Is that and I know we talked about this a couple of meetings ago, and we were looking at those two bottom numbers, that being from project to project. We know we don't see consistency from project to project, but really in that other cost category, in that contingency, and that's why I asked, is that pretty indicative of those type of costs for other moves where you're having to relocate, staff, et cetera?
It is, and what's interesting about this project is a good deal of those costs is the relocation costs, because, as you know, this project is a combination of three separate pieces: the Experimental Science Building, the vivarium, and then renovations to Phase 1 of Welch Hall. In order to accomplish any of the work in Welch Hall, we first have to vacate that portion of it, and this project includes relocation of the researchers and faculty members that are in that portion of Welch Hall into the new Experimental Science Building, and then renovating the vacated space in Welch Hall.
If I could also add, the institution has a large in-house information technology group that prefers to do their own networking and setting up the gateway rooms, and there's a fairly large cost associated with that would be separate from the building construction cost.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, I could have a motion for approval.
So moved. Second.
Wayne, second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by that same sign. Project's approved. Thank you very much. There are 6 projects on our agenda today for approval by the committee, and the first project for committee approval is a request from Texas A&M University for a reapproval of Mitchell Physics Building. This is the second reapproval, and Virgil's going to bring us up to speed on that.
All right, I'll do this one. The Mitchell Physics Building project was reapproved by the coordinating board in January 2007, as you said, at a total project budget of about $63 million. The building complex is located on the north side of Texas A&M University campus. It fronts on University Drive and just to the west of the 7-story Jackie Brown Engineering Building. The complex consists of 2 components. It's the George P. and Cynthia W. Mitchell Institute for Fundamental Physics, and the Astronomy Building and the George P. Mitchell Physics Building. A significant portion of project cost is being funded with gifts from the Mitchell family. The Institute building will contain the Hawkins Auditorium, reception lobby, exhibit spaces, conference and seminar rooms, and faculty offices. And the Mitchell Physics Building includes also teaching and research labs. There will be lecture halls, an auditorium, classrooms, small and large meeting rooms. And then since the last approval of the project by the coordinating board, several changes have been made to the project program by the university. They've included increasing the size of the thermal utility lines being extended to the complex to provide ability to serve an existing adjacent building from the new lines. The addition of a 5th floor over the portion of the Mitchell Physics Building, which is the building that's actually to the right, to house a newly formed Institute for Quantum Science and Engineering. The Institute for Quantum Science and Engineering is a collaborative effort between the College of Science and the Dwight Lowe College of Engineering, which will greatly enhance the university's academic and research programs in this rapidly advancing area. What you have here is the architectural perspective showing the physics complex with the 5th floor added on the physics building, which is the one to the right. That sort of long linear piece is where we added the 5th floor. And also during the course of design, continuing material and cable and labor cost escalation required the expansion of shell space in the project to include most of the building in order to maintain the budget. The building is under construction as we speak. But we discovered that having this much shell space in the project was really detrimental to the major objective of the physics program and the Donner family, which was to consolidate all of the programs teaching activities in the one building. And so after evaluating that situation, the university desired to finish out the entire shelf space in the physics building to meet the teaching objective. So a revised guaranteed maximum price, better known as the GMP, has been received from our construction manager, RIS, to include the program changes and that were described above, and to finish out all of the shelf space in the physics building. And then based on this GMP, the total project budget will now be $82,500,000. As the $82,500,000 total budget exceeds the previous amount approved by the coordinating board by more than 10%, and there's been a slight change in the funding mix, Texas A&M is submitting the project for reapproval based on the project data presented in the reapproval application. If there are any questions.
Virgil, when's the scheduled completion date on it?
I think we're actually scheduled for completion. It's going to be, I think, in the spring of '09 sometime, I believe.
Okay.
Not sure what we have down there, but it's going very rapidly now.
Okay. Other questions? This is expansion of scope, obviously.
Yes. Yeah, by adding the floor to it. I have Dr. Fry with us, who's head of our physics organization there. And we were able to get some world-renowned physicists in this deal by adding the floor and creating this institute. And so everybody's just extremely excited about being able to do that.
Right. Any other questions?
The change in the funding source, the part of the funding, as you mentioned, is gifts, and there's two different gift amounts on here. Were there additional gifts given towards this scope expansion?
Yes, it was all, yes.
And then, so the gifts portion of this funding is the two numbers added together, or nearly $10 million, it looks like.
Right.
Exactly $10 million.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? If not, could I have a motion for approval?
Second.
Mendoza, Mr. Felden-Fells, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by the same sign. Motion's approved.
Thank you.
Very much. All right. The next project is a request from the University of Texas at Austin to reapprove biomedical engineering building. And I think Dave Dixon's going to come back up, and I guess we could keep y'all just in the same order so you're not getting up and down. But anyway,
Always a pleasure.
I will also say, just, we are, Mr. Heldenfeld's a comment on this, he's looking carefully at how we look at reapprovals and that process, and hopefully we'll get a snapshot of that report towards the end. Make sure we're being as effective as we can in this process. So.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, locating this particular project, UT Austin is seeking reapproval for the construction of the biomedical engineering building located on Dean Keaton and University. Again, main building and Darrell K. Royal Memorial, Texas Memorial Stadium are shown. Next slide, please. This request would increase the total project cost and the project scope for the biomedical engineering building. The cost would increase by $20 million, and we would add this amount of scope to the project. It's about 39,000 gross square feet. We have an opportunity with the current contractor still in place to very efficiently add this space. The existing project is about 95% complete, scheduled to be substantially complete in April, May. We would start the proposed expansion part of the building right away and continue with this particular contractor. This building would add space for the pharmacy department, would add 10 medicinal chemistry labs, 10 faculty offices, space for 50 undergraduate students, and teaching space for the College of Natural Sciences. Next slide, please. This rendering shows the existing building as it's almost complete, as I say. This part of the building was originally approved by the board in January of '06. It's 142,000 gross square feet of lab, classroom, and research space, and again will be substantially complete in April-May timeframe. The new space will be added on right at the very edge here of the building, and will continue with the same construction material palette that you see here. Again, limestone base, Austin blend brick, and terracotta tile roof. The project meets, again, all the board's guidelines and standards. David or I would be pleased to answer any questions you have.
The only question I have, this is a question I asked Susan earlier, is when we're bringing these back in for reapproval, how soon, I know that y'all go back to your governance board, your regents, obviously, for reapproval of scope and expansion of project. And with this project being completed in April, in a month and a half, it's the issue we brought up before. You're substantially down the road, obviously, in terms of this project as to where it's going to be. When did this go back before your governing board, and what's the gap between them and when it's coming back to us?
It actually went before our governing board in the last session, February 6th or 7th. So this was a very fast-moving project.
Okay.
The funds became available. The need has certainly been there all along. The design was already developed, but we did not believe that we were going to be able to move forward with this part of the project up until very recently. So it's we're moving through the approval process just as quickly as we can. We haven't known this for very long.
Other questions?
Let me do a clarifying. Dave, the part of the project that's going to be done in April is not the part that the expansion, right? It's the other part of it?
That's correct. I'm sorry if I wasn't.
That was mine.
I'm sorry, sir. The original building, which was approved by the board in January of 2006, will be complete in April, the April-May time frame. I'm sorry, sir. The extension, this part that we're asking for approval at this meeting for, will be tacked right onto the edge of the wing here. And that has not started, and will not start until next month if we get your approval.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that clarification, Susan. I've been up one other time with the other side of the story, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. Other questions? If not, can I have a motion for approval? Ms. Mendoza, could I have a second?
Lynn, you had the second, didn't you?
I'm not on the committee.
Oh.
Well, that would explain why. I'll second.
Okay, second by Mr. Heldenfels. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by the same sign. Thank you very much. Thank you, Susan, for clarifying that. The next project is for the University of Texas at Dallas, and this is to construct a math, science, and engineering teaching and learning center. And Richard Dempsey is here from UT Dallas to provide us with an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. UT Dallas is here to get your approval to proceed with the construction of this project, which is presently in design. It is not a reapproval. Basically, this building is devoted to the teaching of science and mathematics. It doesn't have a research element. It's been designed from the very beginning to focus on that aspect of our responsibilities. It includes laboratories, classroom laboratories for chemistry, biology, physics, geoscience, and a teaching laboratory for teachers of science and math who will come back in after they're undergraduate to observe some of the teaching techniques for undergraduates and develop them for use principally in high schools, K through 12. This building is located in the center of our campus. As you can see on the slide here, it has a cost of almost $30 million. We have designed by the architectural firm of Cal Munoz out of San Antonio. Its approximate size is a little over 66,000 square feet. And we are funding it through use of principally PUF and some revenue finance bonds. We anticipate construction start this summer with a completion in May of 2010. Next slide. Its location is immediately to the north of our principal chemistry building. It is connected by a sky bridge to that building, which will allow the faculty to move freely between the two buildings, as well as many of our other buildings which have a interconnecting bridge system. Next slide, please. Here's a rendering of the facility. For those who have been on our campus and seen our new research building, we have an element of color. We're trying to continue that and try to get a little bit away from the massive concrete structures that we have. So this is a tile structure. We're working to include LED lighting in this as well. So we hope to attract many students, if nothing else, to come look at this building, if not study in it. Next slide. Here's an aerial view. You can see clearly the bridge connecting the two buildings and where its location is. I believe that's the last one. Are there any questions?
It's going to be a radical change going from their trailer-based facilities to this facility, obviously.
That's correct.
Well, I hate to ask, but since you brought up the LED feature, what does that add to the annual utility cost?
Actually, it's very inexpensive. It's a good way, and it's also very low maintenance. So at least that's what it's been advertised as. So.
Did you get a warranty on that?
Well, I think the technology has been developed quite a bit, so we're pretty comfortable with it.
Other questions? It's really a great building.
Thanks, sir.
Congratulations.
I would just like it to go on the record that there's nothing unaesthetic about concrete.
Shameless plug, sir.
Shameless, sorry.
Non-biased comments. So, no other questions. Could I have a motion for approval?
Because it's pretty, I move to approve.
Ms. Mendoza approves it. Second, because it'll have to involve. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by the same sign. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Start taking part. I apologize for not knowing I was on the committee.
I knew we had 5 members.
However, I did do
Well, we're glad to have you, Dr. Phillips. The next project is a request from the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston for reapproval of the UT Research Park Complex. This is stage 1, and I think there's supplemental agenda materials. I think it's this color, each your place. And it's noted in the supplemental materials, because of the reapproval increase, the total project cost has been revised to $174.8 million. And Gerard Marchand is here with UT Health Science Center in Houston to give us an overview. Welcome.
Thank you. See the first slide. This is stage 1 of the Research Park Complex, which is our biomedical research and education facility, along with our Neuroscience Research Institute. It's a 6-story building that has 3 floors for each program, and primarily it's 153,000 gross square feet in the project. Primarily what we've done here is we've added some scope in that we've decided to build out some additional space that was originally designated as shell space. In addition to that, we have we're building a connecting tunnel which will connect our facility along with the joint project we're doing with MD Anderson across the street. And if you go to the slide, we can show you that. This is the Research Park Complex down towards the bottom of the screen here, right here. It's tied to the main Texas Medical Center campus by Bertner. A portion of this also is a large funding increase for our IT infrastructure, and also a new phone system that will be going into this campus. Since it's standing, we're basically starting a completely new campus here, so we have to provide all of these the infrastructure for that. Those particular items were not established when we originally started the first phase of the construction budget. The project here is in the darker orange, and the dashed line here shows the connecting tunnel with the Kabir project, which is actually a little bit further over right here. This project is, this tunnel is being jointly funded between the UT Health Science Center and MD Anderson Cancer Center. And those are the primary, I think we have another one. Okay, yes. This is also the 6th floor, which includes our vivarium, of which about 60% was originally built out with about 40% shell space. Now we're coming back and we're going to build out the majority of this space, including the high-tech CGMP suite on this end of the building that we originally proposed as shell space. So that's primarily what's driving the increase in the project budget at this time. I think that's it.
Questions?
Right. And here we have the numbers as we talked about before. It's funded by PUF funds and unexpended plant funds. It's coming from local funds on the increase in budget.
And the project still meets all the board standards?
Yes, sir.
From what I understand. Okay.
Are we being asked, Susan, to approve just the stage 1 or the entire 174?
Stage 1.
Just stage 1, yes, sir.
This is stage 1. We want to make sure that y'all know about the other part that's going to be coming down.
Any other questions? Now I could have a motion for approval. Ms. Phillips, thank you. Second by Ms. Mendoza. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. All those opposed by the same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next project is the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio. And this is to construct, this is to reapprove the construction of the Medical Arts and Research Center. And Jerry McCoy is here to answer any questions. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Jerry McCoy. I'm Vice President of Business Services for UT Medicine San Antonio, which is the name of our practice plan in San Antonio. And Patrick Lewis with the Office of Planning and Facilities.
With the UT system.
This reapproval project was originally approved by the board in 2006 in January at a cost of $95 million. We're seeking reapproval due to a change in scope. Both the square footage and have changed some, and the cost has changed a little bit. And also the funding has actually changed. We've added some additional funding from university fund, permanent university funds, and some from unexpended plant funds. One of the primary reasons for the scope change was after we had bid the project, as is usually the case, we had a number of ad alternates that we wanted to include in the project. And when we got those bids back, we found that we were able to accept a couple of those, most notably an expansion of the basement, which allows us to better support the clinical activities that are going on in the building. I apologize for not bringing the nice slideshow. The advice I got about that obviously was erroneous and off base. But this is a clinical building.
Not necessarily.
Thank you, sir. This is a clinical building and consists of 10 clinics, many of which are multidisciplinary in nature, a fairly sizable ambulatory surgery floor, which is one of the larger floors, and then supporting basement spaces for that. And those of you who are familiar with surgery centers know that they use a lot of materials, they generate a lot of waste and so on. And our basement support areas we felt were really perhaps a little tight for what we wanted to accomplish there, and so we were able to accept an ad alternate that added space to that and allowed us to improve both the materials flow, the waste, and all the other processing that goes on. We also added space to the ambulatory surgery facility itself in the areas of instrument processing and in the areas of patient prep and discharge. So essentially it allowed us to have a much more functional building, and we think a building which over the long haul will be a much more efficient building from the standpoint of rendering patient services and generating revenue. which is one of the major purposes of this building. And so that's the scope change that we had, and that's where we are. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
When is this scheduled to be completed?
The building is currently scheduled to be completed the middle of February of '09.
Any other questions? Now, could I have a motion for approval? Ms. Phillips, thank you. Second? Second. Mr. Heldenfels, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by the same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate it. The last project for approval is University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. And this is to construct a Center for Advanced Biomedical Imaging Research, the second phase. And Susan,
Hey, how are you?
Hi, Susan. How are you? Welcome.
Thank you. As I promised, I always come back. I love this board.
Susan, this is such a small project. What are you used to seeing?
This project, you originally approved the building in January of '07, and we had indicated we had a fair amount of shell space in that building, and what I bring back is approval for now the build out of that shell space. Next slide, please. The objectives of this project, as you can see, we have a fairly significant deficit in research space, so that this is an initiative to kind of shore that up. It supports all of the advanced imaging technology that's in this building and how it applies to both preclinical and clinical investigations, as well as to enhance the collaboration with UT Health Science Center. You saw the project that's across the street, the tunnel that will go under the CTT and then into this building to support a lot of the animal transport, and you'll see some of the build out of the animal space in this part of the program. Next. So a bit about the program, a lot of diagnostic and new experimental equipment. We have a joint venture with GE that's one of our partners in this building, and a lot of new equipment that you'll probably see on the commercial market over the next 5 to 10 years. A lot of that work will be done in this building, again, to support that collaboration, a lot with the radioisotope production for clinical use for both campuses. Open labs, that's a concept that Anderson embraced a number of years ago with the Mitchell building. It has been very successful. I would say to you all, it also has saved us a lot of money. Just with the ebb and flow of researchers, it's much easier than if it's divided up into small modules and you're taking down walls and things. That this open lab has really worked very well, and we continue to adopt that with our buildings. And then a lot of testing of radiopharmaceuticals will happen is one of the program details here. Next slide, please. Okay, a little bit about the project itself. This part of it is to build out 132,000 plus square feet in the building. It's a 6-story building. The primary programs are animal holding, the imaging labs, experimental diagnostic imaging and tracer and chemistry labs will be here, the open labs I mentioned, and then office and conference space. And this really, a lot of the offices that you'll see in this support the building that connects to this with the Center for Targeted Therapy to have some of those folks. Major equipment in the building are the fume hoods, biological safety cabinets, and a lot of cold rooms. Next slide, please. We anticipate substantial completion in November of 2010, and then to start to occupy that building at the end of the year, early in the spring of 2011. I broke down this funding chart because I know it's always tough when you see these projects and they're combined together, but in the yellow column really shows you the breakdown of funding that was in Phase 1 that you approved. In Phase 2, there's additional grants, gifts that happened to that, almost to $21 million, and then the rest is generated from hospital revenues funds this project. And then metrics. We talked about this the last time when I was here with the Center for Targeted Therapies. We also set metrics for this project and the building in looking at trying to enhance the growth of our principal researchers that are here by 2011 with this program. Also, that would generate trying to get more research grant monies to come into the institution 2012, and then the collaboration with the programs that are happening in the adjacent building with the Center for Targeted Therapies. Next slide. This is our campus, the North Campus that you're within the Texas Medical Center. We're coming through. We have projects that I'll be bringing to you in the spring for this building. And then this is our South Campus here. The UT Health Science Center project is right here, and then there's the CTT and Kabir in this area. Next slide, please. This kind of just gives you a little bit of detail. There's that tunnel, that dotted line tunnel will come under this building and then up through the Kabir, which allows for access to this animal holding area, as well as, if you recall, Health Science Center has 2 floors in this building ultimately that they will build out. And then this shows you the 2 buildings together. This is the Kabir itself that you had looked at earlier and approved, and then this is the CTT. And then if we can just go through the next ones quickly, just give you a sense, the animal holding area and that tunnel connection comes right through here, so you can come right into this animal holding area. We'll continue to build that out. We only had 2 rooms in the original program, so it's the rest of that. It is not a vivarium. It's not overnight housing with animals. It is really short-term holding. There is a vivarium on the other part of the campus, so animals will be trucked over here or from Health Science Center, will come through the tunnel, prep them for whatever experimental things that they're going to do with that building, and then they'll either return or be sacrificed from there. Moving on up, you can see the first part that's in the yellow were things that were approved out earlier in the first phase of the project, or roofs for the adjacent, and then these are some of the labs that are happening there. Moving on up to the 3rd floor, this is all of the, one more, level 3, this will be all the open lab on both sides of the building, and then you can start to see where the offices start to come in that connect then into the CTT, and that happens then on the 4th level, again with the open lab concept there and the connection for CTT and their office function. And then level 5, we are building out office and conferencing in that. The remaining 30,000 that you see here is Health Science Center, and then we have that same situation on the 6th floor. Okay, moving on. I think, is that am I at the end here? So I've tried to answer all your questions. So let's see where you can stump me now.
Questions?
Susan, how do you close off the tunnels when the next flood comes?
We're building submarines. First of all, hydrostatically building the tunnel, so it will withhold that. But at each, because there's exiting stairwell and elevators at each end, then to deal with a submarine door between the 2 so that we can't flood the buildings. So the tunnel itself has the potential to flood, but we hope that the submarine doors, there's always the elevator and the elevator pits. I mean, that's where we're vulnerable, but we'll separate that then from the 1st floor. I think it's really the issue we had looked at with Health Science Center, a bridge versus the tunnel, and I think there's some issues of security that's a little easier to move that animal transport that way.
I still have that vision in my mind of after Allison and looking at the utility tunnels at the U of H, and there were those pictures that were taken from, I don't know, the 3rd or 4th floor, looking down into the center of the library and seeing all the books
it's really
flooding.
hard. Fortunately, all of this area is outside of the 500-year floodplain, so it would have to be pretty catastrophic to do that. I'm more worried about, plumbing lines to break.
Okay.
Other questions?
Well, that was a pretty good answer, though.
Yeah. And I just want to commend you again, Susan. We said this last time about the metrics. That's something that I think could be a great pattern for us to start looking at on a lot of these projects. And then we've asked Mr. Heldenfeld to look at that in his task force. So thank you for bringing those to us.
The one thing, I guess, if I could have just a minute, I know you have a busy agenda on that, but is to kind of look at what the components are. Anderson's tends to be a little different as to some of the other components. To part of theirs is that it's not necessarily a high student population or classroom. As you turn some of those over and look at that, what are going to be metrics when you look at healthcare or on a straight research component as opposed to teaching labs.
Right. Good point.
Anything else?
Any other questions? No, I could have a motion for approval.
Move to approve.
Ms. Mendoza, second. Second by Ms. Phillips. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by the same sign. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Nice to talk.
That concludes our projects for the day, and I'd like to shift our agenda around a little bit right now. I'd like to move us to agenda item, which one is it? It's F. And this is consideration of the Commissioner's recommendation to the Committee of the funding formulas, which we are required to submit these to the LBB June 1st. And these will be used by the governor as well as the LBB in making appropriation recommendations to the legislative committees. And each of you should have received this handout, and of course it's here also at your at each of your places. But before I before we jump into the presentation, Bob and I have had the opportunity for the last couple of days to spend some pretty significant time with hearing testimony at the Incentive Funding Task Force yesterday, and then we spent a significant amount of time in visiting with Susan as well as the Commissioner about the recommendations. What I would like to ask the committee to do today is I'd like to see us have the opportunity to discuss this at length today, ask any questions. However, I would like to, and it will be up to this committee, but I'd like it for us to think about, after we've had this conversation, to consider tabling the actual approval of the formula recommendations for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and that is to give us a little bit of time to, I think we have a lot of questions that are going to come up, I would just suspect. And I know that we have discussed several of those with the Commissioner and Fred and Bob and the staff. So I would ask you to keep that in mind as we go through here. And but I'll also want to have a very open dialogue about what are the issues, what are the concerns, what are the pluses and the minuses, and so we can make sure that we get those on our next agenda to thoroughly discuss this, so we are prepared to bring a recommendation to the April board meeting. Susan?
Okay. I'm going to step through some of the recommendations from the various formula advisory committees, and a little bit about the whole process. Next slide. Appropriations are made directly to the general academics. They are also made directly to the community colleges, but it kind of goes in a circle. It comes through the coordinating board, and we send that out. The formulas are made through the legislature. Okay. It's important for you to remember that the appropriated funds do not go straight. It's not formula funding. Is not all the money that institutions deal with. And this is going to be a review because we did go through it a little bit last time. Formula funding is one part of the general revenue that institutions receive. They also receive special items. They receive HEAF funds, and they receive research development funds through general revenue. They also get statutory tuition and fees, and then for the community colleges, those fees are not, tuition fees are not appropriated, but they do have that money. They also have their state endowments, PUF, and tobacco settlement funds, which institutions get. Non-appropriated, we have designated tuition, research grants, so that they get the indirect cost recovery from those. Most of the fees, individual course fees, are not appropriated. Obviously, gifts and grants, housing, auxiliary fees, and then the community colleges have their local tax revenue. Next. Some of these examples, as I said, are local taxes, tuition and fees for the community colleges, for the health-related, all their practice plan funds, designated tuition, incidental fees, and research grants. Same thing for the universities, pretty much, except for the practice plans. Various sectors we have, and this changes year to year and by institution. So, but virtually for the community colleges, about 86% of their general revenue funds come through the formulas. For the universities, it's only about 60% of the funds that they receive that are appropriated funds are through the formulas. And for the health related, again, it's about 60% of their appropriated funds.
And Susan, it's important to point out in relation to universities that that's an average, but the universities vary widely in how much of their overall funding comes from the states. That you can have UT Austin is at what number?
23, 24%, somewhere in that range.
And some other regional universities might be much higher than 60%.
80% or so. The 60% is if you take all of the state funds in total, and only 60% of the state funds that are appropriated come through the formula. And that's an on total sort of average. It's also important to remember, next slide please, that the formulas are actually used for allocation. They are not budgeting. They are not for budgeting at all. They equitably allocate the funds that are appropriated by the legislature. There are a couple of items where they have to spend the money where it is appropriated. That's debt service and to pay benefits. Those are the only two areas. The rest of it, they get funded on a lump sum, and then those monies can be changed across wherever the institution feels it's most needed. Now we'll get into what's really complicated. There's different methodologies to determine formula funding for each of the different sectors. Okay, and we'll give you the timeline. We've had advisory committees that have started meeting in October, and they met through January. They provided the commissioner with their recommendations in February and March. Recommendations come from the commissioner to the committee, strategic planning committee, and then y'all will be making recommendations to the full board in April. Those recommendations need to go to the LBB in the governor's office no later than June 1. During the summer is when the current base year, and this is something we'll get into a little bit further, base year begins, and we start counting and looking at the number of semester credit hours or contact hours or FTE, depending on the sector, that will be used for their actual funding for 10 and 11. Appropriation process. I got all the others changed. In January of 2009 is when the legislature meets. In early January is they file, depending on the year, either House Bill 1 or Senate Bill 1. It's amazing how it jumps out at you. Reflecting enrollments that are included in March, the new formula runs because the current base year includes data from the spring semester, so it's during the legislative session. So in March we run additional what we call formula runs based on individual institutions, and then late March and early April is then passed by each of the chambers. Then they have conference committee, and then in May the legislature ends, and in June, depending on what the governor does, that's when the appropriations come out. Now we'll get into the actual formulas. We're going to start with the community colleges. They have one formula for instruction and administration. It covers both academic, technical, and included in that technical are the continuing ed workforce-related programs. They have all their programs pulled into 26 different disciplines, and then you hear a lot on the university side about the matrix, and that is a big part of the university. Community colleges use their cost study, and they have it based on a contact hour, and it's an actual dollar amount per contact hour. It is not a matrix like that. It's not a relative sort of thing. The technical and Lamar State colleges use instructional cost, and they use the same formula as the community colleges for their instruction, but because the community colleges are not funded for their infrastructure, for their buildings and facilities and maintenance of those buildings, they use the university infrastructure formula, so they're a hybrid. This next slide shows a little bit of an example of how the community college formula works. And for example, you had 10,000 hours in agriculture, and they get $5.58 per contact hour in agriculture, and 15,000 in nursing, and so on. This 52%, if you added all of those up, assuming you get $207,000 for an individual institution, basically you add all of those up, and whatever the legislature and governor have signed off on as far as the total appropriation, if you add all the institutions up, it is, this past year it was 52% is what was funded. So they funded 52%. So we took it for each institution went in and said, okay, this is how much you would have earned, you get 52% of that. And so that goes down the road. The Formula Advisory Committee this time has recommended 100% of full formula funded based on attempted contact hours, and we'll get into that in a minute, less tuition and fees collected. So we're taking out the amount that they are collecting from the students that is supposed to cover their instruction and administration. They also wanted to get a 10% bump for the critical fields, mostly STEM, nursing, allied health. They also wanted to provide for a 10% premium on developmental education and to provide funding for alternative teacher certification programs through the formulas. Currently, they do not get funded for courses for the alternative certification programs. The students pay the full freight of that. And then they also would like to start getting a small institution supplement funding. And below you'll see their recommendations. It's an increase of $760 million in formula, and then you can read the rest, $84 million in critical fields, $30 million in developmental ed, $4.5 million for alternative certification, and $14 million for small institution supplement. Okay. This is next topic will be one of the major discussion points, and I don't know whether you want to stop at this point or go through all of them. The Commissioner's recommendation is to fund 100% of the median cost level minus tuition fees, but to base the rates that are calculated for each of the institutions on completed contact hours. So instead of funding for students who are enrolled in a course, this funds those that are completing the course. So it changes the rate because of the way the community colleges do. It will change the rate at each institution. The total amount of funding would be the same as it would for other. It's based on the appropriations, but it would change the distribution of the funds.
So Susan, if you could, going back to this slide where we talk about community and technical college instructional formula, the 10,000 hours is on this base contact hours, and we're saying that's the number that would change. Is that correct?
Right.
When you said rate, you didn't mean the dollar.
The dollar would not change. It would actually go up because we're looking at if you have a total amount of money and you're dividing it by, because this is the way their rate is calculated. You have a total amount of money, and instead of dividing it by the number of attempted hours, so if you're attempting 10,000 hours and you're only completing 9,500 hours,
right,
you have a larger rate. What it does is it redistributes that money, because some institutions will have all 10,000 hours completed, and some institutions will not have all 10,000 hours completed. So it kind of redistributes it, and it provides an incentive for institutions to have their students complete the course.
So not only would this number, the 10,000 hours, change, but also this extra funding percentage, we're saying that should be 100?
Well, no, it would be, where the 100 came from, I'm thinking about
the 100%,
the 100 minus,
at 100,
right,
minus the
tuition and fees, right. So we're saying fund all of the instruction and administrative costs, but when you're distributing that fund, you would distribute it based on making sure that the students complete the hours and not just attempt the hours.
Okay, got it.
And Susan, when you're talking about completing the hours, what you're referring to is they enroll in the course, the hours that it takes in that semester to complete the course, and you've actually finished.
You've finished the course. We're not saying that the institutions have to pass everybody. We're not saying successfully completed. We're saying completed the course.
And some of the questions that have come up, Elaine, over the last couple of days, and also as we have been talking about it last week, has been just philosophically, does that make sense? You know, because historically we're measuring on the 12th class day,
right,
and we're taking that really now to the back end of the semester. And I think philosophically it really does make a lot of sense in the sense that it's outcome driven, which is where we're hoping to we all want to have better outcomes, better successes, better completion rates. But I think one question that we have been talking about is really, if you did this, how would it impact all the institutions from the standpoint of the redistribution? Because it's a redistribution methodology, because it's not new money, it's the same formula base, but it's a different methodology for how you're distributing it. And that's where a lot of our questions and conversations have been over the last few days.
Yeah, because then you raise the point of how do you get them from where they were to where they're going in some sort of whole harmless, some method. If you're gonna change it, because as you can see, I mean, this is a fundamental change that we're talking about here. Commissioner, you guess?
Yes, I'd like to say that several things. First of all, the significantly higher levels in funding that we're recommending to the board are based on a recognition of the critical work that community colleges do, and the fact that our research shows that community colleges have been significantly underfunded relative to their increasing enrollments and the increasingly important mission that they fill for the state. The second founding principle of what we're recommending to do differently is that the justification for higher levels of funding has to be better educational outcomes, and with greater levels of cost efficiency. And so we're saying to community colleges and saying to all institutions, yes, we want to support higher levels of funding, but we think the argument to the legislature, to the governor's office, will be much more compelling if we can demonstrate that we're likely to yield better educational results.
Commissioner, you just said something, I think, especially as it relates to the community colleges, that is very important, and this is based on actual cost, is it not?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You do an annual cost.
Which is a little different when we get to the
university
academics. Yeah.
We agree. I'll go ahead and step through some of these others. We agree on providing an incentive to the critical fields, and then instead of a 10% bump for developmental ed, we'd like to have funds trustee to the coordinating board. None of our institutions are doing an outstanding job in developmental ed. We would like to pilot, for those that are doing a good job, we would like to provide some incentive for the other institutions to implement some of those programs and to expand some of those programs in developmental ed. And so we would like to have the funds trustee to the coordinating board instead of just a bump to all the institutions, no matter what they're doing on developmental ed. We would like to be able to target some of that money to try and make some improvements in the developmental ed process.
With the idea that those that we could use this supplemental money to develop fresher, more effective approaches to developmental education under circumstances in which the activities are assessed, evaluated very closely, that the coordinating board has some direct involvement in those activities. So we can monitor their success, and then ultimately the idea is under these closely scrutinized circumstances, develop some better approaches to developmental ed that we can then emulate and replicate more broadly across the state.
Raymond, is this new money?
This is new money. But rather than, as I say, the critical difference between what we're proposing and what the advisory committee is proposing, rather than have a blanket dramatic increase in developmental ed funding, we want to use a smaller amount to develop, once again, demonstration projects that will yield better results. I say this sadly, but there's there's little reason to believe that simply providing institutions more money for developmental education will yield better results. All the assessments we've done of developmental education have indicated an inadequate and unsatisfactory degree of success.
Raymond, what's your hope over the next biennium then? We get this money in, we look around the state, try to figure out what are real strong developmental programs, put some money in there, hope they work, then go back to next session
and say, this is the way we want to do developmental ed across the board in the state.
That's the long term.
Yes, and we have some activities and some different approaches that we want to take a look at. For example, in El Paso, the El Paso Community College is working with the Ysleta School District, and they're giving Accuplacer to students in the 11th grade. And they're using the senior year in high school and in the summer sessions to get students more college ready so that the need for developmental ed will be minimized. The other thing that they're doing, which is also very promising, is that they're modularizing developmental education so that they're creating modules of 1 week duration, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, anything shorter up to a semester that students need to get up to a basic level of proficiency in a given discipline. And that to me is much more promising than the traditional semester model of doing any kind of course. We have evidence that suggests that students who have only a marginal need for developmental education get discouraged if they have to take a semester-long or year-long program of developmental ed. This particularizes developmental ed approaches to the particular needs of students, individual students.
What's the reaction then?
I think that the institutions that are coming up with fresh approaches for developmental ed are excited about the likelihood of getting more funding to carry these new projects further.
Sorry.
Commissioner, I guess you talked about this with the advisory committee, the completed hours rather than...
Well, we've talked to all the advisory committees about this at length.
Can you tell us a little bit about why their recommendation differs from yours?
Well, I think the concern is uncertainty about whether the legislature would ultimately fund the formulas at a sufficient level to protect individual institutions against losses of income because of the slight shift in, not the slight shift, but because of the shift in when you calculate enrollment. That any decline in base funding, 4 or 5%, because it's so tight to begin with, could lead to dramatic cuts in available resources for particular institutions. Some would benefit, but others would suffer. And that's why, to protect against that eventuality, we're suggesting that this should only be done if the formula funding is made available to campuses at somewhere close to the levels that we're recommending.
Lynn, one of the things that we've talked about doing is in this interim 2 or 3 weeks we're talking about before we get back is doing a little bit more work to try to drive down to looking at a couple of things. If you looked at 08-09 biennium and you laid this structure over, what would that have looked like? You know, what would the impact have been? And then what type of enhanced, increased funding would you have needed to have whereby, you know, there could be great benefit to certain institutions because of the way we would measure the completed hours, but at the same time where you're not having a dramatic funding shift going overnight from one institution from X to Y. And we thought that'd be very useful to look at, to be able to put some numbers with it to kind of just see if we laid that over and then run some pro formas out on what type of increased funding would that look like.
That should allay some fears, I would think.
And I think help us to understand it too, what it looks like, you know.
Lynn, every time you get into this, it always becomes you're better off with the devil you know than the devil you don't know. And when we start talking about this, I mean, you're you're dealing with a majority of the money that the institutions use to run themselves on every couple of years. So it's a real big question that when you start changing things, you try to think of the obvious, and then the next thing you get to is you try to think of the unintended consequences. What happens?
And there's not a time gap, I don't guess. In other words, the money is awarded at the same time, whether it's awarded on attempted hours or completed hours, or is there a time gap?
There is a gap.
There is a gap.
There's a lag.
Yeah.
And that's where I talked about the current base year. Right now, we start what we term a base year, and that's what they get funded on, based on the summer, the fall, and the spring semester during the legislative session. Because of going from the beginning of the semester to the end of the semester, we wouldn't have that spring semester information. So we would have to move the base year and have it be the spring, summer, and fall. However, to account for that, what we were also recommending is that there be a certain amount of money for dramatic enrollment growth. For those institutions that are growing rapidly, 3%, 6%, that's currently what it is for the community colleges. They get it. They are getting it now for rapidly growing institutions, that we could account for that in the next year of the biennium, and we look at the increases that they've had in their semester credit hours, and if they've increased over 3%, pick a number, then they would get funding for that in the interim. They would get additional money to cover those increases in the interim.
I may have heard the question say, because that would they receive their money at a later point in time than they would have otherwise, which the answer is no.
Right, the money would still go to them at the lunch center.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
It was just where they would get it, and we've tried to account for that in this dramatic growth fund.
Okay, thanks.
Susan, also on your slide that shows the commissioner's recommendations on the community and technical colleges, first time I've seen them side by side like that. And the gap in between the increase in formula for the committee and the commissioner's recommendation is $300 million. Is that right?
Well,
I'm confused because the only difference is between the two proposals is completed hours and you see what I'm saying? I can imagine that completed hours and measuring on the 12th day is causing a $300 million gap.
I mean,
well, if it was, I would think I'd be hearing from them.
And actually, I did a wrong calculation, because they have this 760 actually includes the increase of 84 and then all of these other increases in here, I believe. Let me go back and.
That's one of an eye catcher.
Right. Those are,
Ms. Mendoza.
Going back to developmental education, in analyzing the best practices and as you stated, Commissioner, allowing those programs that are doing have measured results, positive measured results, and letting them take it, you said, to the next level. What happens to the other programs that aren't doing so well, and most importantly, what's happening to those students while we're waiting for best practices to emerge, and then in the next biennium distribute those programs and those dollars?
Well, frankly, we will continue to have less than satisfactory results until we figure out how to do it better. The simple fact is, and this is one of the tragedies of higher education. We've looked at programs all over the country. We've checked with Achieving the Dream, which is a major national project, one of whose components is improving developmental education. I was part of a site visit team in California last summer that looked at a Hewlett Foundation-funded project to improve developmental education in California. We've been in touch with the Community College Research Center at Columbia University, Teachers College at Columbia, and asked them what information they have regarding successful developmental education programs, and the answer is the same across the board. We are not aware of any examples anywhere in the country where developmental education is successful institutional-wide. We have found programs at one institution or another, both in Texas and around the country, where small programs have successfully addressed the developmental education needs of a small number of students. But in virtually every case, as I said, those programs are very small and very focused, and usually involve a small number of students and just a handful of faculty, and have not had an institution-wide impact. Or we've simply seen that small cohorts of students have succeeded in programs across the campus, but they constitute a very small percentage of the overall student population in developmental ed. So our position on this issue is that we really need to go back to square one in developmental ed, rethink virtually everything that we're doing, and come up with some new activities, some new approaches. I very much like the idea of pushing developmental ed in cooperation with K through 12 down into the high schools.
Commissioner, well, I only play the devil's advocate with you. If this has been such a big failure, what makes us think that by giving us the money that we can come up with a great idea?
Well,
redistribute the money back out to the community colleges.
Well, it's not so much. That's a good question. It's not so much us coming up with great ideas, but to identify those small, strong programs that have potential promise if they had a higher level of funding, and we could expand them in a measured way, and if we had the capability to assess the expansion of those programs in real time and make improvements in real time. That's what we hope to do.
I think the other thing, correct me if I'm wrong, Susan, but the way I understand this, Bob, it's not so much can we distribute it better. My understanding is that the committee recommended that there be a 10% premium on it, and that, right now we fund those developmental education contact hours direct, and we manage
courses only
up to 27 hours. I can't remember. And those would still be funded during this process, but it's to take with that 10% premium,
the premium
as
part,
opposed to putting that in the institutions, bringing that in here to try to determine best practices that we could then go back out and share with the community colleges. But the developmental education funding would not discontinue. It would continue on just at the existing base level.
My question, Mr. Chairman, really had to do with the camel's nose under the tent. I mean, it sounds great. First it's 10%, and then we got a better idea, and next time it's 20. That's kind of maybe somewhat of a philosophical argument, but I figured it's worth at least talking about. I want to hear the answer.
And I think if we open the box a little wider, this is where college readiness has got to play a big role so that we eventually get out of the business of developmental education. And is there a way to use some of those funds to continue on with, the P16 concept,
Well, we would define the way we would use these funds for developmental education very broadly. And if, obviously, improving academic achievement in high school is a way of doing developmental education better by eliminating the need for a good deal of it. So, yes, we would also, Mr. Chairman, we would also bring in experts from around the country to help us, people who've had some success in achieving the dream in small-scale programs, and talk to them in considerable detail about how these programs could be expanded.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I've been wanting to mention that the board's Policy Institute, one of the areas that they'll focus on is developmental ed, and some of the people that Raymond mentioned will, in fact, be brought in through that institute. I also would like to remind you that, given what Ms. Mendoza just said, you have funded some developmental ed efforts through our House Bill 1 money, in which you've supported a bridge program which addresses specifically developmental ed at two different levels, and also a course redesign project focused on developmental ed. So you've already funded some efforts, and not each of those has a program evaluation component built in, which will give more detail in terms of of how well they've worked and
when will
hopefully the
that
scalability as well.
When will that evaluation be back to us, David?
It depends on which ones. Some will be available next fall, but they all will be available by the end of the next legislative session. All the projects, there should be an evaluation in place by then.
Some of the summer bridge evaluation, I believe, is coming to you.
Well, there's one bridge evaluation that will come to the board in April for your information. That will be a joint committee of academic excellence and PNS the day before the board meeting. But those are in place. I don't know the exact dates for all of those. Some of them are already occurring. The course redesign will probably be available this summer because that's already happening. Some of the others that you've just only recently approved won't happen until this coming summer. So you wouldn't have the evaluation available until, of course, after they occur. But that would be probably...
Well, we don't have anything back out of the field yet, so when we're down at the legislature next session to say, hey, here's something we can show you that...
Well, there should be some information through various sources by then. I think that needs to be one of our goals, is we'll have it from those projects, but we'll also have it from the experts that the commissioner mentioned bringing in. And there is a potential to do additional in-house analysis that has not been done at this point. And we've had some internal discussions that one thing we have to, you've heard the commissioner talk about the importance of adult basic education, right? We need to do some additional analysis to break out from the developmental ed efforts those students who really are in adult basic ed to understand where we're really failing with developmental ed and where we're failing with adult basic ed, because right now they appear to be clustered in the same data.
Just a simple question is, David, that will be asked is, show me the results.
We have to have that.
That have worked.
Yeah, we have to have that. You're right.
Okay. The other two recommendations, one is the funds and alternative certifications. We have a huge need for teachers. Right now, the community colleges do not get any funding for alternative certification courses because it's kind of a upper level. So this would provide them some funding right now. Then the other is a small institution supplement funding, and there's a difference in the amount of that one. They are the committee recommended that the small institution supplement be based on 3 million contact hours, which basically is 60% of their institutions would fall into the small institution supplement. They understood that the total amount would be way more than would be reasonable, so they cut that by down to 25%. What we're recommending is that instead of cutting it by 25%, we cut down and say 1 million contact hours becomes a small institution supplement. And we have also suggested they included the TSTCs and Lamar's in that. The TSTCs and Lamar's already get a small institution supplement through the university side, through the infrastructure. So we would back them out of the small institution supplement for this part.
Susan, as a point of clarification back on the developmental ed, the committee's at 30 million, commissioners at 40. And how much of that money are y'all talking about trusting?
The 40 million.
The whole 40 million.
That is, okay. We looked at how much money was actually spent on developmental ed courses. That's $292 million.
Okay.
So the 30 million is the 10% premium that they are suggesting. It is not all of the developmental ed funding.
Okay.
So
A little less than 8%.
Yeah, it's not all of it. We looked at that and backed up. Go ahead to the next slide. Since we're not voting. Keep going. Okay, now we're going to talk about the health. We'll go ahead and talk about the health related since we're not voting on this, and there's going to be some discussion.
Fred, just at some point, can we get a corrected table? I can't reconcile the summary of slide 18.
Yes, and I left out when I was doing the slide, there was a success outcome that is a new category for the community colleges that we're recommending at $100 million.
Can we have somebody work on that now to get the...
Yes.
Well, and also, Susan, some of the amounts, the critical field premium change, the dramatic enrollment growth, from what we've got before the meeting to what we're seeing now, these numbers are also different individually. Like, for instance, dramatic enrollment growth was recommended at $3.5 million in the handout material.
This is the increase. What you're seeing in the slide is strictly the increase.
Okay, all right. Well, then I just go back to my original, which the increase in the pre-meeting materials is $686 million. Doesn't add up. So.
Well, and that's that $100 million in the...
And that would be most of it, yeah.
The other thing that's not in here, I'll say, is, we haven't discussed in here, which is a big piece, is the $100 million to promote student success based on degrees awarded. And I don't...
Right, and that was the $100 billion that I was saying that when I was doing the slide,
Well, why don't you still walk the committee through that, because that's another...
Okay,
there's two major changes in here, that being completed hours, versus hours attempted, and the second major change is the success component that is being added to the formula. So,
the success component, we're trying to go towards a more outcome-based formula. So the success component is $100 million, and it would be for the community colleges. It would be based on degrees, certificate, and transfer students. So it would look at the number of degrees and certificates awarded and the number of students that transfer to universities and prorate that across the institutions, probably using a 3-year average to kind of smooth out any bumps. And that one, it would be a 3-year rolling average to distribute money for institutions that are doing a good job at graduating or transferring on their students. And that would be new money again for the community colleges. It's not something they currently have in their formulas.
And we've heard numerous comments about we're working on incentive funding off to this side, and I think the committee understands that there's $100 million that's been appropriated for this biennium, and then the governor has appointed a task force that is charged with the task of not just that $100 million, but also looking at long-term, proposing some long-term recommendations for incentive funding, including community colleges. And so I think the other comments that we've heard, and we want to encourage this committee to talk about a little bit more, is that we see it, we're putting this in a success component, but it's also perceived somewhat as an incentive base.
It is
being layered in.
Let me explain the purpose of this. What we're trying to do is to align and create greater consistency in our funding proposals and the funding proposals that are emanating from other sources. The governor's office is proposing an incentive funding package that will focus for community colleges and for general academics, will focus on increasing graduations in critical need fields and increasing the graduation of at-risk students. What we're trying to do with this proposal in the formula is create a foundation that is consistent with that by saying that we also want to award the very concept of focusing on improving the number of graduates that we produce. So this is formula funding that would be connected to improving graduates, completers, transfers in all fields. The governor's incentive funding proposal, which is being now considered by the task force on incentive funding, would provide an additional source of money for graduates in critical need fields and of a certain class of students, so that we have funding formulas and incentive funding that are aligned and directed towards the same goal. That's the reason we made these modifications.
Very good, excellent. Okay, Susan.
All right, move on to the health-related institutions.
What I'll really entertain any motion from the committee as to whether, would y'all rather go through all these recommendations and then decide whether we're at the point of approving these recommendations or discuss them further? We'll wait until the backside of the meeting to discuss all three of those. Is that okay with the committee?
Sure.
Okay.
Health-related institutions actually have 5 formulas: instruction and operation, infrastructure, research enhancement, graduate medical education, and then the mission-specific, which only applies to MD Anderson and UT Health Science Center Tyler, and that is because both of those have very few, if any, students. So that's one of the reasons for the difference for those two institutions. Health-related institutions are again funded on a different criteria. They are funded on a per full-time equivalent student basis instead of either a contact hour or semester credit hour. And on the slide you can see the different weights for the students. Allied health is 1, biomedical science, and on down the list. It says per head count, and I said full-time equivalent student. It's a combination. For their medical and dental students, they are considered, one student is a FTE. For the other academic areas, it's a combined up to an FTE amount. So it's a head count FTE/FTE base weight. They get the number of students times the weight for a total, then times the base value to receive their account. They also get an infrastructure formula and take care of maintenance and operations for the utilities, and they have one rate for the for the health-related institutions other than, again, MD Anderson and UT Health Center Tyler. That's their infrastructure. The next one is their research enhancement formula, and they get a base amount of $1.4 million plus 2.19, or actually I guess it was 1.73. We're recommending 2.19% of all their research expenditures amount. That varies obviously by institution. The committee recommended, and how they got to the rates, is they went back and they looked at the 2000-2001 biennium and the amount that they were receiving at that time and what they received in 08-09. They realized that it was going to be unrealistic to try and get back to the 2000-2001 rates for each of these items all at one time. So they suggested doing it in over a 2 biennium period. So this time they are requesting to go back to half of that, take care of half of the increase this biennium, and that is where the committee recommendations have come in, and then return with the understanding that they want to return to the 2000-2001 rate in the next biennium, knowing that the current legislature cannot impede on the next legislature decisions as far as funding, but that is the recommendation coming forward. That would increase the rate from 1.7 to 1.29, increase the funding up to 11,112 for each student in the I&O funding, and it also increased the infrastructure 8.94 per square foot. I'm getting confused. Per square foot for MD Anderson and UT Health Science Center, and then 9.58. So these are very over. So those are the committee recommendations. The commissioner agrees these are actually very reasonable recommendations. Increase in infrastructure would be an increase of $22.3 million. Increase in research enhancement. And these are all projections because we don't have the final data for this base year, be 17.7. Has been, since the committee made their recommendations to include different off-site campuses, that they get an increase for those additional off-site programs. We have had one who came in and met the criteria that was adopted last time, so there has been an increase in that amount.
Susan, can you describe that for us? Put a face on it.
Because the health-related institutions have small programs kind of located around the state to serve the different areas for public health. MD Anderson has a site in Bastrop, for example, or Smithville, actually. Those types of sites, they're small, they're very specialized usually. They get what we call a small program supplement, which is different from the small institution supplement. So it's called a small program supplement. During the last session, the committee recommended certain criteria be laid out before these small programs be funded with additional funding for their infrastructure. One was that they be recognized by the legislature. They enroll students. I mean, there's not enroll students, but they had certain criteria laid out, that they have the space on our inventory, that sort of thing.
Do they have students at those locations?
Sometimes they do have students, sometimes they only have residents, and sometimes they have research. So it does vary across the board for the health-related institutions. The committee had 0 new site for multi-campus adjustments. Since that time, we have had a site come forward, and it's the Ron Hale Pharmacy School in Kingsville has come forward. They meet all of the criteria, and so that's where you will see a difference in the recommendation from the committee to the commissioner. And we are recommending that one site. There have been 2 other sites that meet the criteria, and they have been given authority to build campuses, but they're not built, so they have no space on their inventory at this time. Those will be coming forward too. Also, the committee did not recommend a specific amount for graduate medical education. The amount that the commissioner has, that is in this recommendation from the commissioner, increases from approximately $5,000 per graduate medical education resident up to $7,500. So that is accounted for in this. $7,500 does not get us to what we really think it's going to cost. A study was done, I think 2 biennia ago, where they said it could be as high as range from $15,000 to $50,000 for a medical student. This would get us up to half that amount. The health-related institutions have been, as long as we can keep getting closer.
Susan, you're saying it would get us to half of
the minimum amount.
Yeah, half of the minimum.
For the graduate medical education. The Nursing Shortage Reduction Program is, again, a program that gets spread across all the institutions. It goes to universities, community colleges, and health-related institutions. And it is based on increase in graduates. We didn't have we requested a small increase. The legislature actually funded it at $9 million last time, or $14 million last time. We now have data back from the schools showing the increase in number of faculty that they've hired, the increase in the number of nursing graduates is going up continuously. That's why you're seeing a large increase in the amount for the Nursing Shortage Reduction Program, because we are seeing some really good results coming out of that program.
Has that historically, like for the community colleges, been funded under the formula?
No. There was, all nursing programs are funded. The courses that they offer are funded. This was a program that was started in 06-07 biennium, and it was funded at $6 million the first year. It was expanded to $14.7 million the next for the 08-09 biennium. Because we didn't make huge, large recommendation to increase it last time. They did. We didn't make them because we didn't have any data from the institutions to show what kind of results we were getting. We now have some information that's showing some pretty good results from this. We think it deserves to get.
How is that distributed? right?
It is distributed, we collect from the institutions the number of graduates they receive, and for every student that's increasing graduate, a degree that leads to certification. So if it's an associate degree that's for transfer in nursing, they don't get counted. But if it is an associate degree that leads directly, includes the clinical and that sort of stuff, that you can get an RN degree or, get certified as an RN, they get counted. And that's laid out in statute. It's pretty well laid out.
But you have to be then certified in order to submit it and get paid for it?
No, you just have to,
Just to get in the program?
you get your degree.
Okay.
You get a degree in that. And so it's only on the increase. It's based totally on increase. So you don't get it for all of your graduates, only as you increase. And the guidelines are stipulated in such a way that the money that you receive from this program has to be spent in nursing as an increase in your nursing.
When was the base year set down?
The first year, it came in 06-07. So that was the first year we had any money that went into the program.
Okay. So that's the base year, and it will be the base year moving forward?
It will, each year it increases. So, like, right now, we got in the 07 graduates, and they got funded for the 07, increase of 07 over 06.
Over 06.
And then it's 08 over 07. So it's increased each year. For the 08-09 biennium, the legislature did put a stipulation that community colleges were only allowed to get 40% of the funds. And that is because it's focused on faculty. So if you're getting an associate degree, you're not going to be able to teach. If you're getting a BSN or a master's or a PhD in nursing, you have the option of then becoming a faculty member for the community colleges or for the university. And so it is a way of...
Obviously, one of the biggest problems is we don't have enough faculty to teach.
That has been a limitation in nursing programs, is to get enough faculty. So... Okay.
Any questions about the health side? Well, just again, the summary says that the overall change from the biennium was 112.4, give or take a couple $100,000. That's about right with the pre-meeting materials, but this table number 32 adds up to 123 million, 122.9, something like that. So there's about a $10.5 million difference. I know the new site for Randall Pharmacy is $300,000.
Well, no, this 112.4, because it's only the health-related. The table back here, and I'll try to get it to do a bold line, the nursing shortage reduction, because that is not included in the health-related, because it's spread across all three sectors.
Okay, that's right here. That'd be the difference.
So that's why the difference comes in. We have to show it somewhere, and we show it with the health-related, but it affects all of them. And so that's where the difference comes in.
Seems health-related to me.
But it goes to all three sectors.
Okay.
Okay. Go on to the university formula. Universities currently have 2 formulas and 2 supplements. They have the instruction and operations formula and the infrastructure formula. They have a supplement for teaching experience and a supplement for small institutions, which for the universities is classified as those institutions with fewer than 5,000 students. And even though it is one formula, it is called the cost matrix. It is based on a 3-year rolling average of what an institution spends in there's 21 different areas that all the programs are rolled up to, and it's by program area and by level. And it takes the median amount for each of those areas by level: lower division, freshman, sophomore classes; upper division, master's, doctoral, and special professionals, and develops a matrix. Each of those are funded. You can't see it, but I'll use a Steve Murdoch. line. As you can plainly see, nobody can plainly see what he's talking about.
Susan, we can't even read it.
I can't even read it on the sheet either. But it does get a little more complicated. So as you can plainly see, you have different weights. Liberal arts is considered the base weight. And so you take all of the amount of money or funds that are spended by level, I can't see it even on blow. She brought me a single page. I still can't see it. Yeah, that might help. Let me go back over again. And I have contacts that are supposed to correct for that. Everything is tied back to liberal arts being a weight of 1. And so we have a matrix that is assigned. So in the example, you have 10,000 hours in liberal arts, which is a weight of 1, so you have 10,000 hours. You have 15,000 hours in nursing upper division at a weight of 4.96. You get a total number, we call them weighted semester credit hours. You'll hear that term quite frequently. Currently, they were funded at $59.91 per weighted semester credit hours. The matrix is designed to account for the different levels of students that the institutions have and the different types of program mixes. It takes into account how an institution, what types of programs an institution accounts for, and the level of the students. You have some institutions that have more graduate students than undergraduate, and that sort of thing. And that is what it's designed to take into account as part of the formulas. Next slide. Next slide. The committee recommended an increase of $364 million for instruction and operation. And as we talked about the supplements, the teaching supplement is a 10% bump on all weighted semester credit hours that are taught by undergraduate semester credit, weighted semester credit hours taught by tenure track faculty. That is estimated to be $114 million. This is all based on attempted semester credit hours. Okay, for those who haven't been on the board for a while, the committee recommended this matrix that I'm talking about back in 1998. Was it 2001? Representative Ratliff developed the matrix. It was based on gut feel, basically, on what should be where in the 03 biennium. 03 or 98, 99. That Ratliff developed the one matrix. It went from 14 different formulas to the one matrix formula. To take that into account. That was in 98, 99. The legislature asked the coordinating board to look at the actual costs associated with each of the different program areas and levels. That was done for the 0607 biennium. It made a huge shift in the weights that went into the matrix. So instead of implementing the what we call the new matrix, okay, it's 6 years old now, still the new matrix, all at one time because of the huge shift, it was recommended that it be phased in. So the first year, which was the first biennium, which was 0607, it was 50% old matrix, 50% new matrix, or how the weights were assigned. During the 0809, it moved to 75% new matrix, 25% old matrix. It was scheduled to go to 100% new matrix for the 10 and 11 biennium. The committee, because of the shifting in that matrix, the committee is recommending that it be remain at 75% new matrix, 25% old matrix, with an inflation and growth factor included in the dollar amount. They would also like to retain the teaching experience supplement, and they would like to adjust the small institution supplement to have a graduated reduction to a head count of 7,500. instead of the $5,000, where right now they get $750,000 a year up until they reach 5,001 students, and then it goes away. They recommend, number one, changing it to a 3-year average on the head count, and starting at 5,000, go down 20% until it gets to 7,500 head count. That's the committee recommendation. On the infrastructure side, they do an annual cost study of how much their utility costs and their cost for maintenance and operation. That would get them to a rate of 8.3, and then they would like a increase for inflation in 2011. Modify the small institution supplement, I already talked about. So that would make a committee recommendation would include infrastructure increase of $245 million. Part of that is, if you look back, the amount of money that they've been getting has been basically decreasing, even though utility costs have been going up and maintenance and operation costs have been going up. So that's why you see a large increase. The increase, currently they get the small institution supplement, so it would be an increase of $3.9 million in the amount used for the small institution supplement. The Commissioner's recommendation would be to continue the implementation of the cost-based matrix, go ahead and bring it on to the 100% of the new matrix, which is based on a 3-year rolling average of cost. And like the community college, have the cost matrix be funded at the end of the semester credit hours, so on completed semester credit hours instead of attempted semester credit hours. The numbers that go into those weight. It would also provide for some type of transitional student support and convert the teaching supplement to a supplement that would be, or not supplement, but a performance-based, based on graduates, total graduates. And I think he did an excellent job of describing how it would be to be as a enforcement for the incentive funding, not replace the current incentive funding, the $100 million. And as we talked about with the community colleges, because of going to a completed instead of attempted semester credit hours, have a dramatic growth fund set aside so that we could fund those institutions that were growing rapidly. And there's also been some discussion about looking at ways of possibly increasing the amount of transparency in the formulas. And so we're still working on those, and as Mr. Ryder said earlier in the discussion, that this is where we would like to do some discussion and look at some other ways or some things that y'all might make you feel more comfortable, and then we'll come back to you in 2 or 3 weeks.
So there's no, unlike the other 2 categories, then we don't have a column or comparison between.
No, we don't on this one, because there's still a lot of items that we're looking at on this one.
I understand.
Questions we have, there's several other comments we'll make. What other questions can we answer for those of y'all who may be overwhelmed by all of this in this hour presentation?
Remember, there are only 5 people in the state that understand that.
I don't think there's 5.
Mr. Sheriff, I never said I would. Susan, under the trustee aspect of the dramatic growth funds, are we going to be using some sort of formula that we develop on the front end, so when they meet those milestones, that money is...
Right. We look at their semester credit hours generated for whatever the additional year would be compared to what they had. And if they have, this year for the community colleges, it's set at 3% for the first year and 6% for the second year of the biennium. So if they reach 3%, then we would automatically go in and look at it, compare their semester credit hours, and say, okay, this is where they did their increase of 3%. Take the formula rate or the matrix rate, multiply that out, and basically send them, here's the amount of money you earned.
Is that in community college? Does it work the same way here?
It would work the same way.
Okay.
in the theory there obviously being that we can handle that growth in the biennium. Well, let me back up. Obviously, unfortunately, in four-year institutions, if they have rapid growth, they're always working behind. So they've got to find local resources in that biennium to help fund their own growth until the formula kicks in.
Correct.
What we're talking about here is doing something similar to what we do in the community colleges, is in that particular biennium, if they've got an increase from year one going into year two, that we can immediately put funds in their hand for that growth. Okay.
And that's exactly what we're suggesting here. Part of that is because of the having to back it up to fund on completed semester credit hours. It makes it that much further behind the curve before the next formula would kick in.
If we're going to close the gaps, which is part of the objective in a lot of those schools, then you've got to be able to either handle the growth or track.
Right.
Okay. I don't want to clarify that.
Okay.
Ms. Mendoza?
Regarding the convert teaching supplement to performance based on graduates, the teaching supplement, as I understand it, was about getting tenured faculty into the classroom. Are we now saying we're going to measure the effectiveness of the instruction regardless of who's teaching?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Without being rude, I think there's a lot of professors that shouldn't probably be in the classroom. So
There have been some studies, and I think some of the institutions might agree. Sometimes the tenure track faculty may or may not be the best person to be teaching a freshman level course.
and I know we're balanced. I'm sorry.
Well, to me, it's once again shifting from assumptions to results. Assumption is that tenure track faculty would yield superior results compared to temporary faculty, adjunct faculty, graduate student teaching assistants, and so forth. And this shifts the focus to outcomes and says to institutions, we don't care what combination of teaching resources you use. What we want to see are improvements in outcomes.
Agreed. And it also, it seems, helps us balance the other part of closing the gap, which is increase in research. Typically, if I understand that correctly, your tenured faculty is usually involved in research. So that would help us increase, hopefully, the research opportunities while still completing the mission of trying to close the gaps in college completion rates. So
It puts a tighter focus on achieving one of the critical goals of closing the gaps, producing more graduates.
But let's not ignore that component of getting the researchers engaged.
No, it could have a number of positive consequences.
The dramatic growth supplement is also incentive funding.
Yes.
One thing I'd like to do, and I want to recognize Jesse. Raise your hand. You've lasted through a lot more than this. You lasted through all of the advisory committees and the leadership you've provided, and we want to, and Jim, and we appreciate all the work that's been done. And Jesse, as chair, do you have any comments you'd like to, make? You'll probably get another opportunity, but I really did want to recognize him. There's been really great work done, as always, and so we're giving you the opportunity to say something if you want to, Jesse. So, what are the comments on the formulas? That I would like to just make a couple of recommendations. I think philosophically, and I'm talking personally here, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the committee, but in looking at the recommendations philosophically, I really do agree with the approach that's been taken in terms of looking out, trying to become more outcome-driven as opposed to input-driven, looking at the final product, and I think that is absolutely on the right track. My major question right now is, again, what does that impact look like? You know, when you filter this through based upon different funding levels that we might see appropriated by the legislature, how does that impact? Because one thing that we did not talk about is this transitional support, and that is in the community college recommendation as well as the general academics, and that is intended to be put in there, and it's to I guess I'd call soften the blow. So if there's one institution that is materially impacted by this in any one year, that is there to try to, I wouldn't say hold harmless, but to try to take out the sting of that impact. And that's what we've talked a lot about in the last 2 or 3 days, is trying to be able to look and see if this was laid over on the 08 and 09 biennium, what would that look like institution by institution? And what type of increased funding would we need where we wouldn't see those dramatic impacts? And the thought being, should we make this recommendation subject to assumptions of what that appropriation might be? You know, it's, again, without the numbers, you can't tell that. And so I would like to recommend, at least for the community colleges and for the general academics, that we charge the staff and us with doing a little bit more work and digging down under those numbers. And they've already started that process. Susan pulled out a spreadsheet about this long about an hour ago and showed it to us. So that thought process has been going on. That is not a revolutionary thought by our chairman or by me. But read it with the
Let me hold it over
larger than that?
No, it wasn't any larger than that.
But I do think I want to commend both all of the advisory committees for all three components, as well as the staff and the work that's been done, because I really think it is in the right direction. And I'd rather see us get it right the first time, as opposed to rush into and approve it today. I'd rather see us make sure we all understand it, because if each of you can understand that after that one presentation, I commend you. Not because of lack of clarity in the presentation, but it is very complicated. And I've read the package 4 times, and I think I'm still confused. You know, so the question is, do we go ahead with if we choose to do that as a committee, do we go ahead and approve the health-related recommendations or not? Because I think we could take all 3 of them up at one time, which would probably be easier in my opinion. But I will leave that to the pleasure of the committee and any recommendations from you.
Mr. Chair, do you need a motion to table?
I guess I would need a motion to table.
Yes, Bill shaking his head yes.
Bill motioning yes.
Just to spark conversation, I move to table all 3 items until we convene at the appropriate time.
Second. Okay. Any further comments on that? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the same sign. Motion carries. We will try to put that together maybe in the next couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks is what we're thinking, so we can still be ready for the board meeting. And we're going to invite all the board members, because I think it's for everybody to try to understand. We will invite all the board members to that committee meeting. So, okay. And thanks to everybody for your hard work. Commissioner, any other comments on that?
Well, I just wondered if you would like us to provide a little bit more information about that, what else we might look at to provide greater transparency in the general academic formula.
Rephrase, you want us to provide you with that?
No, I said, would you like us to, it's kind of vague that we're currently reviewing the need for additional transparency in the formula. May I ask the committee to reconvene? I think that there are probably people in the audience, and I would assume that there are members of the board who would like some greater clarity about that. And I'd like to give you more information about that, because I'd appreciate more guidance from the board about how to proceed.
I agree.
Susan, would you explain what we're taking a look at?
Just mean bigger print.
That's it, bigger print.
Oh, we're gonna get formula
Not
guide.
transparency.
Okay, it is to look at, right now there's a National Association for College and University Business Officers, NACUBO, and they have a recommended guidelines for reporting information. For those of you who are familiar with the sources and uses, we use their guidelines in sources and uses for how we show the funds being expended by the institutions. And there's been some talk about looking at the format that NACUBO has set up to look at how the money that we are, the way we calculate the cost study, the information that comes to us from the institutions, and applying those into the matrix to say, right now it's at $59, say $25 right now is spent on instruction, $10 is spent on research. How we could possibly look at taking that amount and showing that so that it would provide a little bit more clarity on how the money is being generated, how it's being expended, where the costs are coming from, but using the NACUBO as the standard.
And if we took a look at that, because this would represent a significant shift in the way we do the formulas, we feel it would be incumbent on us to reconvene the advisory committee on general academic institutions to get their input on this possibility.
And it would only impact the general academics.
Yes.
Not impact the community or the health-related stuff. Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that. We're jumping on the agenda. I'd like to, before, I know that Chairman Shepherd needs to leave, and go right ahead if you need to. He's going to catch a plane. And I know that you need to leave at 3:30 or now?
Sure.
Pretty much now, but can you, Fred, can you just give us a snapshot real quick of how the meeting went today on the capital funding work group and where your work group stands right now?
Yeah. I can find where I put my notes on that. The thing that's being handed out is actually for a different topic, but the capital funding task force met with I don't know, about 80% or more of the folks who originally participated, and reaffirmed the three recommendations that the work group under Neil Adams had developed, and those were recommendations to fully fund the HEAF, raising the corpus target. The original recommendation was from $2 billion to $4.5 billion, and other HEAF-related recommendations. Do a state set-aside match of maintenance and repair funds at 1.25%. Universities could spend up to 1.25% of their E&G, and the state would match up to that same amount. And then the third recommendation of that original work group was to transition from tuition revenue bond funding to issuing general obligation bonds. And while there was, there were some comments about rethinking a couple of those things, basically the group still believes the recommendations would lead to better long-term planning and funding of facilities, and is supportive. So that is the short answer to your question. There were about 8 key issues raised regarding the general obligation bond concept. Some of those issues being benefits that would help sell this recommendation in terms of legislation, others being concerns that'll need to be addressed. And there were also some very good questions that were raised about the mechanics of, how will this work? Well, for instance, will the set-aside match, how will that be drawn down? And will it be a reimbursement? Will it be paid in advance? Therefore require some accountability to show that the maintenance repair funds were spent. So we got down and did have some fairly detailed level questions.
I want to respect your time. Mr. Hildenfels he's been telling me he's got to be at another event in another city this evening, but next steps, Fred, was it thought to reconvene that group again, or to take this information and have us look at it from the coordinating board standpoint?
I think that's open. I think that there's certainly, in terms of strategy, and I think the next step really was to pull some of the background information, like the survey of other states, for example, that was already done, and put together the information that will be needed to support testimony and begin to formulate a legislative recommendation. And then at that second step, I think this work group would have a lot of valuable input in how that gets drafted. Okay.
Thanks so much. And I'm going to let Susan or Gary make the report on your task force that's working. Okay. Thanks so much. There are a few other items. There are action items, and please, nobody else leave, because we're going to lose a quorum if anybody leaves. We do have a few other action items that I'd like to bring up, and I'm going to try to run. Most of these we can run through pretty quick, and I don't want to rush to them, but at the same time, I want to make sure that we cover the action items. And I think I would go back to agenda item, I'm a little bit confused here. I guess it'd be E, which was consideration of the Commissioner's recommendation of the committee relating to the review of Chapter 17 of the Board Rules with amendments to Section 17.21C2 in accordance with the Texas Government Code, Section 2001.039. The rule review notice has been posted in the Texas Register for the 30-day comment period, and the amendment to Section 17.21C2 will be posted on March 7th for the 30-day comment period. However, the coordinating board staff has notified the institutions of the rule review and proposed amendment, and we have received one comment from the University of Texas system regarding the amendment to Section 17.21C2, and that's in terms of the number of days that is a conflict with their Board of Regents. So Susan's going to provide us with a quick update on how we might resolve that.
Right. One of the things that we have talked to them about, and I think is going to hopefully solve this issue, is that what we will do is they can go ahead and submit their proposals. By moving it back 10 days, it would give us at least a week or week to 2 weeks to process all of the projects that come forward to the committee and the board. What we are asking is that they go ahead and submit the projects, and then after their board meets, which is still before the Strategic Planning Committee, they go ahead and send us their Board of Regents certification. That gives us time to get the briefing sheets ready for you, ask whatever questions we have about the projects, that sort of thing. Part of this is, the committee has decided to meet, all the committees meet earlier to give more time for staff to do work in between committee meetings and board meetings. But we don't want to make a hardship on the institution. So this way, they can submit their projects, we can ask questions, and then when they do get their Board of Regents, they can just submit that. We will have that completed. So you may see agenda material that say pending certification, receipt of certification, and that's all it's going to mean. We think that will take care of the issue.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve. Second.
Second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. I'm going to jump down. I want to get all the action items out of the way if we can. And I guess the next one would be two? I guess it would be I, wouldn't it? And agenda item 2I is consideration of the recommendation to the board for authorization for the board chair and the chair of the Committee on Strategic Planning to approve the Coordinating Board Strategic Plan 2009 to 2013 to be submitted to the Governor's Office and the LBB by June of this year. And for all those who have been on the board, every year all state agencies have to update their strategic plan, and it's 2 years, and submit it to the Governor's Office and LBB. We have not received the instructions as of this meeting yet, and we're hoping the instructions will be similar to previous years, so we're already in the process of updating the strategic plan that we've used in the past. And I will say it will be somewhat a little bit broader this year, as Susan said, and that we'll be incorporating some of the HB1 initiatives in there that might not have been in the previous one.
There was no HB1.
Pardon me?
There was not.
There was no HB1, yeah. But because of the timing, what we'd like to do is have a recommendation for the board to authorize the board chair and the chair of this committee to approve that strategic plan as we have in the past.
We will be sending out a draft of what we've developed before the board meeting, so that you will have at least a draft to go from. And so if there are things that you don't like at all on what we're doing, that you will have something to comment on.
I move.
So moved by Ms. Mendoza, second. And all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by the same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. And then I think the last action item we have, just in case somebody leaves, is agenda item 2J. And that was consideration of recommendation of the board for, again, authorization of the board chair and chair of this committee to take the same action on the strategic plan for the Texas Public Community Colleges, which will be submitted on the same time frame as the other strategic plan. Again, we're in the same situation. We're waiting on instructions. The thing is, a little bit, we submit one plan for the community colleges.
Right,
correct?
it's one plan for all the community colleges, and we work with the association in developing that plan.
Again, because of the timing, could have a motion. Brenda makes a motion, second by Elaine. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed indicate by saying no. All right, okay, I think that gets all the action items out of the way. I'm thoroughly confused where we are. I guess
I'd like to propose incentive funding for staying to all the action items. Is that a problem?
You get it.
I should get a
We'll pay you as much as you do for
why don't we go ahead and, Susan,
Usually the women are carrying the day, I'm just saying.
have an update on institutional report card.
Okay.
There's another item G.
And I'm going to ask Janet Binke, who's Director of Planning, to provide an update. On the, what? You said on the...
Institutional report card.
Oh, on the institutional report card. Okay, sorry about that. I was thinking you were talking about the... I went to the wrong thing.
Okay.
That's why Janet gave me this look like, oh my God, what are you talking about? I'm going to give you this look.
I can do it.
And let me find it in your packet.
There's
There's
a
all
yellow- there's a
yellow
yellow.
supplement. Janet did find one little area. There's a lot to talk about. And this is coming to you for the second time. It's the next page back on the yellow item. Because we have the two different examples here. We had done one. Senator Shapiro filed a bill in the last session that basically came up with a report card for universities, community colleges, and health-related institutions. She wanted two different presentation types, one for consumers, parents and students, and then another one for legislators. The bill did not pass the House, passed the Senate, did not pass the House. We had gone ahead, Janet had been working with her staff to try and come up with something that might work for Senator Shapiro. We went ahead and showed y'all what we had been working on, thinking we'd bring that forward. The committee at that time suggested that we merge the two into one report card and make it one page. We're not at one page yet. We're trying. We've got it to one page front and back, so it's 2 pages, but we're still working on it. We've tried to make it much more graphical in nature. As you can see, there's the 2-year institution, and then the yellow supplement has the one for the universities. We have been working on this. We're pulling out what we think are probably the most important items, trying to also take into account some of the differences. As you can tell, for the community colleges, there's a big section on the developmental ed, on how they're doing. All of the data from this comes from the accountability system. For the, oh, Janet's shaking your head no. Some of it is.
Some of it's from the accountability system, some of the other things aren't. If we thought there was something that people would be particularly interested in, we put it in anyway. But before we would go forward with these, we would probably send them out to the institutions and try to also find out from parents and students what they might be interested in seeing.
On the university side, I have been talking with the university, the Chancellor and President's Association. There is something called the Voluntary Student Accountability. It's a national push to have institutions report or provide information for students and parents. When we initially started this process, there were only about 5 to 10 of the institutions who planned on participating in the VSA. That is now, they have now been working together, and all of the institutions, all of the four-year institutions in Texas are planning on participating in the VSA. The one advantage of having the VSA is that it allows students to compare not only in-state institutions but out-of-state institutions. So that is one advantage. Some of the measures that we have in here, we have modified slightly. Undergraduate classes, we had it in the accountability, we have undergraduate classes with fewer than 20 semester credit hours. The VSA has 30 semester credit hours. It's been suggested that we break that out to lower division and upper division because that is a huge difference. I'm still talking with the Chancellor and President's Association, and we just found out that the VSA can be modified or tailored for individual institutions or individual states if all of the institutions within a state want to do that. So we're going to be working with the President's Association so that we don't have multiple sets of numbers out there. And that would, so instead of, looking at what we have on our report card and having it split one way, and that's just an example of the class size, compared to what they're seeing nationally with other institutions and trying to, go back and forth, we're going to try and make those as similar as possible, but still make sure that we give you the information that you want. And so this is our first kind of draft of making. We added a lot more graphics to it and trying to make it. Some of the uses, we will be taking these, and as you see in the briefing sheet, behind each of the briefing sheets you get like a demographics of an institution. We will be using this in place of that piece of information. The same thing would be true about all the programs, new programs that come to you. They would, instead of using this same thing, they would be using the report card or this thing.
So what are the next steps, Susan?
I've got another meeting set up with the Chancellor and President's Association. And Friday I'm going to be in San Antonio on a panel that's going to be looking at the accountability system, looking at this, looking at the VSA, what the differences are, and talking about some of that, what is useful, not useful, that sort of thing. So we'll be going forward from there. I'll be on a panel with some, it's with the, I think all the provosts, University Provost Association.
Do you have any suggestions, having reviewed this?
Well, I have a question. Unless I'm missing it somewhere, are you going to include the hours, attempted hours completed?
That is something we could include in here. That's not something that we had thought of it. That is somewhat of a new.
Yeah, it's new, but if we're going to
spend on that,
it's going to be an important measure of their success in terms of funds, and I think we ought to.
From a completion standpoint?
Yeah. Attempted and completed.
Good suggestion.
And we can do that, and we can also do it by level.
Right.
Will this be interactive on the website?
No. It'll be a static document, but it'll have links to things.
Okay.
That'll give more information. And I'd like to say also the data that's in the mock-ups is not real.
Right.
Trying to reconcile it.
Yeah, don't try to do that.
If Ed would have been here, he would have been there.
It would have driven him crazy, right?
Yeah.
You'd already told me you had a lot of questions, so.
Along the same lines as what Lynn was asking, it would be great to, and I think we talked about this at the last meeting, but it'd be great to be able to drill down persistence rates within the colleges. Because this pie chart here about degrees awarded is in total. It's not necessarily, for example, I know this is dummy data, but 29% of the, is that liberal arts, liberal and fine arts?
What chart are you on?
University,
University, the bottom right-hand
Okay.
corner.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that 29% of the kids who entered graduated. It means that out of the total, 29% are liberal arts. It would be great to see persistent rates by colleges so you can tell.
Okay.
Because you have an overall graduation rate, but if a student is trying to say, you know, I want to go to engineering at this school, it'd be nice to see what the persistence rates. Is that crazy?
Well, it's complicated because students change majors so often.
Right.
And sometimes
good indicator,
institutions don't report to us even though they report a declared major, sometimes they don't update that as frequently as they should.
And we could have those that start as undeclared and kind of show you where they end up. But, you know, roughly half of this incoming, maybe not half, a lot of the incoming freshmen have an undeclared major. So
that's tough.
That's one of those, you know, we've looked at different disciplines. It works better at the graduate level.
But we do have a report on time to degree by kind of broad categories like this, where we track students and see how many semester credit hours they've taken in the fall and spring semesters and how many semesters they've enrolled for. And we send that out to the institutions who then report it to their boards. And that we have on our website too. So that might be useful thing to connect to this, because it kind of gives an idea if you're graduating in this field, how long does the average student take to graduate?
Right. It'd be great, because can you measure it at the 10th grade, the sophomore year? Can you start at the sophomore? We want to weed out those that weeding out, that are, you know, obviously that are not there to help the students succeed, but are there to.
And we can look at that. We did a study one time, probably 3 or 4 years ago now, where we looked at students who started with a declared major in one of the STEM fields, and then they had a higher graduation rate. They weren't all graduating in STEM fields. Engineering at A&M, since I went there, there were a lot of freshman engineers. Not quite so many when you get into graduation. They're graduating, they're just not graduating in that same area. And there may be something that we could look into. We'll go back and forth with you, because there's going to be a lot of definitional issues. But what we could do is say, okay, if they're starting in this broad category, how many are graduating at all, and how many are graduating within the same general field type? I mean, because engineering, you go from, you know, mechanical and electrical, all of those. So we could maybe work on something like that that would show you what you're looking for.
If it has any.
Well, I mean, yeah, it does, especially in the critical field. It has a lot of merit in those critical fields, because we are losing a lot that don't. They start there and they don't finish there.
The institutions should know that and be using it, shouldn't they? I mean, in terms of
they probably know it.
Fields,
They have, you know, they keep a lot more information on their individual students than we have.
And one of the other issues with that declared major field that we have is just because the student says they want to major in that doesn't mean the institution thinks that's really what the student's going to major in. So we do have a number of what we call restricted programs where the student actually has to get approval from the institution to be admitted to that program, and then it's a little easier for us to track those students.
Nursing is one of those where you have to be admitted to the program even at the undergraduate level.
Okay.
But we can work on stuff like that.
Other comments? Really, it's good work. You know, I would also encourage us, because I don't think this will be on our board agenda. I don't think I'd want to. Because we don't have a finished product, but to send it out to the whole board and let the whole board look at it and give you their thoughts as you're getting ready to go back to your groups and visit with them.
Okay.
And to maybe lay over some of the comments that we talked about today as to some enhancements to it.
Okay.
That's really great. I think
Be glad to do
it's going
that.
to be really wonderful to have this in.
The agenda item 2G. No, I just did that. Yeah, 2H. I'm sorry. And these are, I think, going to be pretty quick reports. I think.
Right,
Susan.
these are very quick.
2H is a presentation of success reports produced by the institutions in the accountability groups. And Janet, I do think you're making this one.
Yes, this one's mine. This one's mine. And this will be a little longer than the next one, so bear with me. The Coordinating Board's accountability system is used to track institutional performance on critical measures that exemplify higher education's missions. That's the assessment part of accountability. But for us, an equally important aspect of the accountability system is to help improve institutional performance, not just to measure it. The Coordinating Board uses the institutional peer groups to support the improvement aspect of accountability. Because of the size of those groups, all the institutions have the ability to actively participate in them. For the first time in 2007, the Coordinating Board gave a formal assignment to the peer groups. The assignment was intended to increase the peer group's knowledge and use of the accountability data and to enhance peer group interaction and collaboration. The groups were asked to select several of the success accountability measures. We suggested 3. Many of them chose a lot more. But they were asked to choose measures of particular importance to their institutions and to prepare short reports on this topic that would tell what the data says about their group members, and then to talk about the best practices that the institutions have been using to improve their performance. We did initial drafts, but the institutions were given minimal information or instructions on how to structure those reports, because we wanted the reports to really reflect what the group wanted to put into it. And it was our attempt to use this to give real meaning to the peer groups and get them working together more closely. These reports are important for the information that they'll share with you and with the public, but equally important part of this process has been the conversations that the peer groups themselves have been having when they've been discussing these best practices. And I wanted to share with you a rather brief quote from one of the members to his peer group. I want to express my appreciation to you and all others who've commented on and contributed to the report. It's been a pleasure working with you and being involved in this adventure. After learning about the cross-impact analysis approach, to learning what each of you is doing to support student success in your respective institutions, I've truly enjoyed the experience. I, for one, would like to continue the conversation we have started, for there are many commonalities in what we're doing to support student success, and yet there are many interesting and innovative ideas being tried. We can all learn from each other, but to do so, we need to keep on talking to each other. And that's the end of the quote, but that's exactly the kind of thing that we wanted to come out of these groups, was for them really to sit and share and bond a little bit. The peer group success reports will be sent to you with the April accountability or agendas for your whole board. And we will summarize the best practices in the white pages for that, and the groups themselves will continue to discuss the best practices. Also at the April meeting, we'll have representatives from one of the university peer groups come and talk with you, and also from one of the community college peer groups to give their perspective on the reports. So.
Questions or comments? Look forward to those reports in board meetings.
Thank you.
Okay. Agenda item 2 is a report on the excellence goal of closing the gaps for 2015 and
Janet's also going to give that to us.
Yeah, and this is just an update on what's going to be on the April board meeting. Each April, we report on the state's progress towards achieving the gaps, closing the gaps, excellence measures, pardon me. This year's presentation to the April meeting will give statewide achievement on those measures that have traditionally been reported. But we're also going to discuss the possibility of changing some of the closing the gaps excellence targets. Excellence is hard to quantify, and so it's been hard for us to come up with measures that are very effective in demonstrating the success of the institutions in achieving excellence. The current goal that's in closing the gaps is to substantially increase the number of nationally recognized programs and services at colleges and universities. Nice goal, but pretty general. And the targets are related to increasing the number of top-ranked institutions in the categories of research, public liberal arts universities, and health science centers. These are fine measures, but they are not very directed and focused. And we need to help work on things that could come up and help the institutions work on their aspirations in terms of their excellence goals. In particular, we're thinking of additional measures that would regard outstanding undergraduate education. And now that we're nearly midway through the Closing the Gaps timeframe of 2000 to 2015, as part of the midpoint reexamination of the goals and targets, we're going to give special attention to coming up with more precise definitions of what the excellence objectives should be. The institutions will help contribute to this process, and our suggestion is going to be that in the next round of the accountability meetings that we ask the groups to focus on what excellence measures would be good and appropriate for each of their respective missions. So.
That's probably the hardest one to...
Definitely the hardest one.
You know.
And so we want their help in it. Help us.
If I could add just a little context, I mean, it is very hard. It's been frustrating. But there are two reasons that got on the table as a goal to begin with through the board and the planning committee. And just so you'll know, one was in terms of the concern about increasing the number of graduates. There was a lot of discussion saying we want to make sure, and you'll hear this in other contexts now, that schools are not just producing graduates and they don't lower their standards. So they wanted to have, they saw that the excellence as some balance to that. The other element was, it wouldn't seem that way to you now. For example, we'll have something on the next board agenda about something that's really going on good at at an institution. You heard last time from a community college member who had won a national award. At that time, the board only talked about bad things at institutions, and I mean, frankly, that was part of the discussion, and there was a belief that we needed to get on the table. In fact, we didn't even have an inventory of any type of what really was good, what type of which programs were perhaps receiving some level of national recognition. So a piece of it was simply to pull that together and to put some emphasis on what was positive. That wasn't all of it, of course, and so I just mention that because there's been some impact outside of closing the gaps in a way that's been helpful in terms of, I think there is a little bit more attention on some of the good things that's happening and not just the bad things, but we've fallen far short of having some real measurable targets, and so I was glad when Susan and Janet said that they wanted to discuss that because it is challenging and we need to do better.
Well, we'll probably get some great ideas, too.
We hope so.
Great. Any other comments on that, Janet? Thanks so much. What I'd like to propose is, since Fred is chairing our task force on the potential improvements in the facilities approval process, what I'd like to do is table that for 2 or 3 weeks when we come back and talk about formula funding and talk about that. I hate to dig into that without...
Lane can do it.
Well, Lane, you want to go ahead and do it? Or?
I mean,
You're
no
half the
way
task
would I
force.
assume that I can take Fred's place. I happened to be there, and I stayed awake the whole time.
What would you prefer to do, madam?
Whatever you would like, Mr. Chair. I mean, in the interest of time, we can save it, or I can go briefly over it. Really,
Why don't you go ahead and give us an overview, and then we can bring it also back up in a couple of weeks for more.
Cut it down to 45 minutes.
Good.
Page 1.
Thank you.
This was passed out to you all. Our leader, Fred, has taken us through a process by which we're looking at 3 areas. First is presentation of what comes to the board, what comes to the committee about each of these projects. So in this packet, you will see towards the back, you will see proposed format and then current format. And if you'll take a look, what we've tried to do in conjunction with Susan and Gary is put on the paper what is most important that we as a committee and we as a board need to take a look at when we go through the approval process. It is condensed. It is really bubbled up to the top, balancing critical information and our fiduciary and responsibilities, and taking away some of the other things that might be distractions. Now, keep in mind, the back page will be the report card. Elements that we felt weren't giving credit to this process, such as closing the gaps, and institutions just putting some reason as to how this is closing the gaps, are taken off, because again, it discredits the whole process. But by looking at the report card, we can make a better assessment on really what that's all about. Secondly, the criterion. We have just started the process on criterion, and if you'll take a look at some of the values on the front page that drive different levels of approvals, as well as some of the considerations for standards, these are the things that are going onto the format that you see before you. And what Fred has challenged us as a group to look at are these the right numbers? For example, when we talk about space utilization, is that the right number? When we have a standard versus a guideline, how should we measure a guideline? Because it's just that. There's no consequences that we can leverage on the institutions because it's a guideline. So how do we look at that? How do we effectively analyze that, and so on? So you'll see hopefully next time a review of the actual criterion. Then we have not even touched the approval process. So we will leave that for another time, but hopefully this gives you an insight as to which way we're going and kind of the direction that we're moving in. So, Mr. Chair, that's a quick overview of a lot of work by staff.
I'd really like to take some more time at some point, whenever you think it's appropriate, Elaine, to kind of walk through the proposal, because to really, I mean, this is the first time I've seen it, and so but I think to take the time to walk the committee through that, what was the thought process, the methodology.
Absolutely. We would hope that you would give us the time when we're ready to at least float the first real draft before this committee and walk through that and discuss those points exactly that you've laid out. Why, when, where, who, what.
Because the thought process is for us to do that, and then would be to put a task force together where we have institutions participate in that task force.
Oh, yes.
Would be the next step after that.
Right. The other piece of information I forgot to add that we want to attach to this is how this project relates geographically to the state, as well as how a project may relate. For example, you have one example on here is the civil engineering, construct civil engineering laboratory building. How does this one relate to what's surrounding it, either geographically, and then from a state perspective, where are we putting the majority of our resources? So we're working on that so that the board can take a look at a macro level from a state perspective. Did you like my Texas? All right. I knew that's what it was. Thank you. A state perspective, where we're putting our resources.
May I make a comment? First of all, this report was given with much efficiency and personality, so thank you. But the last comment, I'm so glad to hear that, because that is personally what I'm looking for. I mean, when we look at these projects, that it's on a one project by one project basis, but to have that context to me is absolutely critical. So thank you very much.
Right. We hope to. We're still working on the ideas and how do we do that.
Right.
But that's what we need to do, is get back to our coordination role.
That's right.
please look at this, and if you have changes, we already have changes from the meeting that ended at 1 o'clock that aren't here. So, but we will be incorporating those at the same time.
What could we propose that we take this and really spend the time, and we're only got one agenda item that I can think of. That may be took us an hour and a half to do. It may take us another hour and a half. But I also think that we did a lot of the prep work today in explaining methodology and thought process and philosophically how we're approaching formula funding. I don't think we've got to go back to the beginning next meeting. Okay. Hopefully we're further down the road, and now we'll be thinking more about how we put it in action. If we have time, I'd really like to put this on the table. Otherwise,
we'll go ahead and put it on the agenda so that we can talk about it if there's time.
Because otherwise, we're going to be to the next strategic planning committee, which is going to be June. Yeah, 3 months from now. And I'd rather go ahead and give you direct feedback on that, even though I understand there's still more work to be done, but there's been some really good work. I mean, just from initially looking at it.
Very exciting.
And you combine this with the report card, it'll be behind it. So, and I'll mention that to Fred, but I'd like to see us, if that's okay with the committee, where we can really, and I guess ask you and Fred to give us our charge as to what you want us to accomplish in that meeting. Okay?
All right.
As a committee.
We'll do it.
Okay.
You're going to require that all buildings be made 100% of concrete, aren't you?
He's been pushing for that. I couldn't figure that out.
Can't figure that out.
Really good work. So.
It is.
The last...
put on their checkbox. How much concrete?
Our last agenda item, and I'm going to ask the commissioner to also join me in this. I'd just like to give a brief update on the incentive funding task force that met for the first time yesterday. And we met from 1 to 4. And I want to say that I think where to start. It was a very broad meeting yesterday, okay, because the meeting started from trying to establish a common base for the task force to come to a common area to begin from. And so during the meeting we had presentations by I think 6 different institutions that were general academic institutions. We did not have any community colleges at the meeting. We are going to propose we bring community colleges in for our next task force to have testimony to get their thoughts and their comments. But I guess what I would tell you is that most of the members of that committee were not coming from the same common place that the commissioner and Bob and I were coming from, having worked with this board and having put together our initial, what I'd call our initial straw man for incentive funding. And so we tried to get everybody to that common point. I will tell you that some consistent themes came out of that meeting. The consistent themes that we heard from institutions and people sitting around the table, and Raymond, you can help me on this, but were, one, concerns about the base. Don't touch the base, which is what we talked about today. Number 2 was sustainability. Sustainability from the standpoint of from one session to the next session, making sure that we are recommending an incentive program that can be sustained and supported and funded going out in the future, so that institutions don't go out and spend dollars to build up, for instance, infrastructure, and then that funding go away. I heard consistently some thoughts about measure against themselves. Self-improvement is what I heard in that meeting yesterday. I think I said long-term commitment of the state. Another issue that came out consistently was the whole issue of how do we measure quality. So, we talked a lot about measuring in terms of number of degrees, improvement in number of degrees produced, improvement in percentage improvement, proportionate share, but then also this whole issue of quality, and we had several presentations that talked about
different strategies and methodologies being employed by institutions, and some of those were NESE, and I'm trying to think what else. CLA that's being used by the UT system right now. But I guess the way I'd summarize this is that I walked out of there understanding that there is a whole lot of work that's got to be done, because we are really, in my mind, starting from almost ground zero with the task force right now. And so our Chairman Kern Wildenthal, has asked each of the committee members to come back to the governor's office with recommendations on what their ideas, independent ideas, would be as to metrics and methodologies for incentive funding. We did suggest to the task force that we take the straw man that was originally developed by the subgroup here and use that as a starting point. So that will be sent to that group as a starting point, and to Chairman Wildenthal. Commissioner?
I think you did a very good job of summarizing what we did.
Yeah.
Are we going to be released from our legislative mandate?
Great question. That was brought up by Chairman Shepard in the meeting, and his comment in that meeting, which I thought was very appropriate, is that the time is drawing nigh in terms of what we are required to do from a statutory standpoint. It was also brought up that, what is required from us from a statutory standpoint did not encompass the community college arena. Commissioner and Chairman Shepard and I met again yesterday with the governor's office to talk specifically about that. And Chairman Shepard has that specifically on his agenda. He is like a bird dog. And his goal is to get a letter, or if we don't, Lynn, we really feel like we're going to have to take some action as the coordinating board to act on what was required of us in statute.
Because I don't know about y'all, but I don't like Huntsville all that much.
No, we agree with that. And I will tell you, unless we can get some of that assurance that, from the leadership that we are covered from that perspective, then what we've talked about is that us going ahead and taking a lot of the work we've done, at least submitting that as proposal. So that will be sooner than later.
Well, thank y'all for work. I know this has been frustrating and time-consuming. You're doing a good job.
It's been interesting. It was a learning process for me. Thank everybody for their time, their commitment. Thank you for the in-depth conversation on formula funding. We will get an agenda out to you on formula funding soon. We're going to put our heads together, and we've already talked about what we do in packages and try to get some dates. We're hoping that we can maybe put it around. They're talking about the next incentive task force maybe being the week of the 23rd, I think, Raymond. So the thought was, could we piggyback?
I think we have an email with some recommended dates.
I have not read my emails, okay. But we'd like to try to tie it with that if we could. And if it's even the same day, we might do that in the morning and this afternoon. And if you wanted to come and listen to the testimony of the incentive task force, it might be interesting to do that. And again, I would love to invite all the board members to this next meeting. I think it's that important.
We'll do that.
So, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Phillips. Thank you, Ms. Committee Member. I appreciate that. Second on this.
I just can't get used to not being on agency ops.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.